videos floating around social media. The guy's training his butt off in the offseason. Burns. I think he's got that energy back because he's with a good team now. That should help him, and that should help this Hurricanes team. Goaltending is going to be fascinating to see play out. You got the two Cripple Creeks, Frederik Andersen and Antti Raanta. You don't know if you're going to get health from them for a full season. And we know they can both be capable. You got to tip your cap to Raanta. He did everything he could in the playoffs last year. But if those guys aren't healthy or struggle, you've got Pyotr Kochetkov waiting in the wings, who could be your goaltender of the future, who we saw in the NHL a bunch last year down the stretch, and he played pretty well. So I think they're okay in goaltending, and at least they can rest on the fact that the two old geezers of the group get hurt. You've got Kochetkov there to turn to. So Carolina is going to be pretty good. But I do think there could be a small step back just because I think the offensive depth is not nearly as strong as it was last year. And maybe even defensively, the same thing as well. What do you think here for Carolina?
Yeah, this is a team I really like. And honestly, early in the summer, I was saying that this is my pick to win the Stanley Cup. I still feel confident if they could win the East. They're definitely in that wheelhouse. Not sure. Like I said, I don't bet many actual cup futures, so I didn't put any money towards that. But this is definitely a top-tier team. I think it's a race between them and the Rangers to win the Metro for sure. As you mentioned, they're not as strong offensively, but I think they just have a bit more balance. I think they're a bit more gritty this year too, and that's something that they're going to need. They're built more to last in the playoffs, I think, this year than they were last year. Adding those veteran presence like a Burns and a Stastny, the goaltending you mentioned, of course, you say Anderson and Raanta, can one of them just stay healthy for a whole year? But if not, you have Kochetkov, who said played well in the NHL, got kind of thrown into the fire right in the postseason, had a tremendous Calder Cup run with the Chicago Wolves. I watched a lot of that with him. He's definitely one of those goalies to look out for, especially if he does get called up and you see a plus price with him. You might want to look to back him. And I didn't mention it with Calgary either, Dustin Wolf. Be on the lookout for him. If you see him make a call up, get called up at some point because of an injury, don't think about fading him. Those are two guys I'll probably be betting on in their first starts this season, should they make them in the NHL. But Carolina overall, top to bottom, I think they're balanced enough. They can stay healthy. They can weather the storm. I think they were built to last in the playoffs. I think there's going to be some times to fade them because they might get so overpriced. We might be able to get some value going against them in the regular season, especially later on in the year. But I think once the calendar turns toward April and May, they'll still be around. I think they'll be a team that could definitely make a deep run.
All right, good stuff. Well, I know this is now the point of the preview show Alex was dreading, but we must approach it, and that's the Chicago Blackhawks here. Next up here. And look, last year they actually thought that they were going to be a dark horse contender, a team that would be a playoff team. We had that kind of upside. Seriously, you rewind back to last year, we thought if things break right for Chicago, they could contend for the playoffs. You bring in a Tyler Johnson, you bring in Seth Jones, you brought in Marc-Andre Fleury last year. What ended up happening? Tyler Johnson underperforms, gets hurt. Seth Jones underperforms, and Marc-Andre Fleury didn't even finish the season with the Chicago Blackhawks. That tells you how much things fell off the cliff for them last year and underachieved. Jeremy Colleton gets fired. Derek King has to take over. And now this year, you're definitely into rebuild mode. And it's a question of, you're going to have Taves and Kane at least for the first half of the year, pre-trade deadline. But what happens at the deadline? Kane for sure is going to end up being dealt, most likely. And then we think the New York Rangers, Sabres, Oilers, teams like that are all in the mix for a Patrick Kane at the trade deadline. And then you look at the forward group. I mean, you say goodbye to Kirby Dach. You say goodbye to Alex DeBrincat. You say goodbye to Dominic Kubalik. So where is the other goal scoring going to come from for the Blackhawks? Here's Max Domi, though, to save the day, or Andreas Athanasiou. Those are two guys they added who are offensively capable. What am I going to get from Domi, though? Domi in the regular season was terrible last year. Domi in Game 7 against Boston, he just had the game of his life. But I'm going to need to see more consistency than that from him. And again, you're going to be asking a lot of Sam Lafferty's and your Buddy Robinsons and your Mackenzie Entwistles to provide some depth scoring for you. That could be asking a lot. The blue line is already ravaged. I mean, Jake McCabe's one of the stalwart stay-at-home defensemen they've got, and he's on IR to begin the year. Caleb Jones banged up. Connor Murphy, what else is new? Battling injuries already day to day. You got Alex Vlasic, Seth Jones, Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson's going to be elevated to a top pair, not at this stage of his career, in my opinion, is Jack Johnson, a top pair defenseman. Oh, and I haven't even gotten to the best part yet, the goaltending. Which could be one of the worst tandems in the NHL. Peter Mrazek, who's inconsistent when he is on the ice, and then off the ice because of injuries half the time otherwise. Oh, and then you've got Alex Stalock, if you believe what our guy Alex B. Smith is saying, might only be still in the NHL trying to get his pension fund from the league. So good luck with that goaltending tandem. Alex, have the floor. I mean, it's going to be a tough watch for Chicago fans this year.
It's going to be rough. It's literally around this time last year, everybody's all hyped up and thinking, okay, Marc-Andre Fleury, you got Seth Jones locked up. Kane and Taves, who had been playing through injuries, Taves had been out, but both guys seem to have been healthy. Kirby Dach came back from the wrist surgery. Alex DeBrincat poised to have a great year, which he did end up having. It looked like they were going to go into Colorado as a big underdog and possibly get a win. They got blown out. They gave up 3 goals in that first game and ended up losing like 6-2. Here we are a year later. Colorado's putting up a Stanley Cup banner in a week. And the Hawks are giant underdogs, and they need to be giant underdogs because they are one of the worst teams in the league. It is pathetic what this starting lineup is going to look like. Outside of Kane and Taves, like you mentioned, the only offensive punch will be Athanasiou and Domi. I don't expect any of the, and that's the thing with the Hawks over the glory years. You had 3 lines that could give you goals. You barely have 1 here right now. So the bottom 6, I don't expect them to chip in much of anything offensively throughout the season. You mentioned all the injuries. Half the defense is already ravaged right now, and that spells doom, especially when you're talking about the goalies we have. Peter Mrazek, who is inconsistent and often injured. So even when he stays healthy, he's still not exactly a quality goalie you can rely on to be a number 1. And then Alex Stalock, whose glory years seem to be behind him. He, like I said, he's just trying to wrap up the games he needs to qualify for pension and be done with it. I don't know if we see him all of this entire year, to be honest, once he hits that mark. So it's just really ugly. There's not much to, like in the AHL department either, especially goaltending-wise. Arvid Soderblom's your 3rd stringer. So if Mrazek does go out, which, you're not necessarily betting on, but you wouldn't be shocked to hear that he's the guy that comes up next, it's just going to be ugly. So overs galore, first period overs, full game overs, opponent team total overs with the Hawks. They're going to give up a ton of goals, not going to be involved in a lot of games, not going to win much. Hopefully they can tank far enough to get the number 1 spot and get Connor Bedard for next year.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a Chicago team that definitely is going to have their share of it. I didn't even mention, by the way, Brandon Hagel and Dylan Strome gone as well. And those were 2 guys that you counted on for offense last year as well, if you're Chicago. So, that offense will take a hit, but I still think they'll be better there than defensively and in goal, which speaks to your point that over still could be in play for sure for the Blackhawks. Colorado Avalanche, of course, the defending Stanley Cup champions, who I'm not going to be in a rush to back in the regular season, Alex, especially early. You won the Stanley Cup. It was something they worked toward for years. They always kept coming up short in the second round, and they finally put it together, won the Stanley Cup last year. And I don't know if they're going to be ready to go off the hop this year. Landeskog is already going to be missing the first part of the year for the Avalanche due to injury. Comfer is also battling injury early on. And you do have some questions in terms of who obviously losing Nazem Kadri was big. Alex Newhook, they have all the faith in the world in him to possibly be a second-line center. We'll see if he's ready for that. I like that they brought Big Val Nichushkin back. You had to after the season he had last year. And I like them getting Evan Rodriguez, actually, a very nice addition. This is a guy that stepped up for Pittsburgh last year when they were dealing with all kinds of injuries. So I like that addition. Rantanen, McKinnon, Lehkonen, likely to start the year as the top line until Landeskog gets back. I still like them up front. Logan O'Connor. You're going to see more out of Ben Myers, the college player who had a little bit of time with them last year. Shane Bowers is going to get more of an opportunity as well. You got Cogliano, Helm, the veterans still there. So lots of depth up front still. The blue lines, I think the best in the NHL. Deepest for sure in the NHL. Goes without saying. Cale Makar, incredible during the playoffs. I mean, we already knew he had a great career up till that point, and the regular season was great for him. But his defensive game has improved so much. And, you had the 28 goals, the 58 assists, the 86 points last year in 77 regular season games. Then he even took it to another level in the playoffs. The guy is just an incredible defenseman. He could go down. Jimmy Murphy, that was not hyperbole by our guy Jimmy when he said it, that he could be the next best defenseman since Bobby Orr. Seriously. That's what Cale Makar could honestly be with the trajectory he might be on right now. Devon Taves, Sam Girard healthy again, Josh Manson, who fit in seamlessly after they got him from Anaheim. Bo Byram's only scratching the surface of how good he can be. And then you've got Eric Johnson, a good, still veteran defenseman, rounding it out. What a sixth defenseman that is. The question is in goal, though. I mean, the one thing about Kemper last year is he was kind of so-so in the playoffs, but great in the regular season. Excellent in the regular season. And now you're going to turn to Alexander Georgiev and Pavel Francouz. And I said in the free agency show, Alex, that I thought Georgiev would be a change of scenery and a really good team around him would help. And then I'm seeing him getting lit up the other night. So I'm not so sure anymore. Like, I got to see it from Georgiev and Francouz, who when he's healthy can be good. He's got to have more sample size under him. He's got to stay healthy. But the goaltending is a legit concern here for Colorado coming into the year. But I don't know if it's going to be any kind of hindrance enough to dethrone this team from being a cup contender at the very least again. What do you think, Alex?
No, absolutely not. I think they're definitely going to be a cup contender. I think we see them kind of do the old Golden State Warrior kind of move where they struggle a little bit early, pace themselves, like I said, especially because of the injury. Think about how injured they were last year. I mean, this team had a ton of injuries. To win a Stanley Cup and deal with as many injuries during the regular season and key injuries, key players out as they did, it's remarkable. So they're going to try to pace themselves a bit more. They know what they have to do, and they're in a weak Central Division where they shouldn't be really much worried. The only team that's really nipping at their heels is Minnesota. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But other than that, I feel fine with this Colorado team. He said the best blue line core in the league by far. And when their forwards are healthy and rock and roll, and we saw them put up 5, 6, 7 goals a night. So overs galore with them. Gonna have some spots to fade them. I really hate the fact that they are opening against Chicago this year, because if there was anybody else they were playing at home for their banner ceremony night, I would be looking to fade Colorado. I always like to fade the champion at home for their banner ceremony night, very emotional kind of time, and the fact that they're dealing with a couple of injuries as well. You know, if they were playing someone else, I definitely could see Colorado losing. Look at the preseason game last night against them with Dallas. They looked kind of lifeless there, and that was with most of the starting cast that you'll see for the opening night lineup. So this definitely will be a team to fade early, but they will get stronger late, and then the only thing you'll be able to play will be overs because they'll be so overpriced. We'll start seeing them in the $2-3 range right off the bat as soon as they win 5 or 6 games in a row.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was thinking the same thing because I'm like, Colorado may not be a team I'm rushing to bet on early in the season. But I said if they play like a Chicago, Arizona, Philly, or San Jose on that opening night, you probably couldn't go against them because those are, at least in my power ratings to begin the year, which I've already formulated. And by the way, our Patreon page, we're going to keep that going this year. I'm going to have weekly power ratings. Yep. This year posted on the Patreon.
2 sets of power ratings and the goalie charts, and I also added home ice advantage to my goalie charts this year too. So all that will be available at Patreon.
Yeah, they're my 4 worst teams right now. Start the year: San Jose, Arizona, Chicago, and Philly. And so I said if Colorado plays one of those teams, it's gonna be hard to fade them on banner night. And sure enough, they're playing Chicago. Columbus Blue Jackets. First word that comes to mind is over with this team in terms of the way they're going to play, in terms of their games, their game totals, not necessarily their season point total as a team. I'm talking about their game totals over. They are going to score some goals. I still think they're going to give up some, though. When you look at the defense, I don't know if they've improved that part of their team enough. Werenski's more of an offensive-minded defenseman. He's got to continue to improve the defensive side of his game. The Boquist, same kind of thing. Pete Gavrikov can cough up the puck sometimes. I like Jake Bean. Gabranson, great with Calgary, but was that a bounce back year from him because he played better, or the product of the Sutter system, which is going to help a guy like Gabranson? It's not the defensive system they've got in Columbus, that's for sure. So can Gabranson play as well there? That's the question in his own end. They're going to be able to score, though, and Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine, the kind of chemistry and magic they could create could be something to watch. We know he's a legit playmaker, one of the best passers in the National Hockey League, feeding Patrick Laine over and over again, 5-on-5, and especially on the power play. I mean, this could end up being, and Laine is apparently already gushing about the possibility of having Johnny Gaudreau as his line mate. He only had 26 goals last year, but he did play better down the stretch. We know this guy has scored 36 and 44 goals in the past. This is another player that, again, I'll repeat that sometimes because, you're talking about an award the lead goal scorer, the Rocket Richard. Austin Matthews has won it 2 years in a row. Maybe you're wasting your money and flushing it down the toilet, betting someone other than Austin Matthews to win that. But just like I said about Tage Thompson, 60-1, Patrick Laine, 40-1, when he's going to have a ton of opportunities to score goals because he's got an elite playmaker now to play with and Johnny Gaudreau on that top line. It's not something to look past, in my opinion. A little 40-1 shot, maybe, on Patrick Laine to be the Rocket Richard winner this year for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Jack Roslovic, is a guy that offensively had a great second half. He's going to help them. Sillinger and Kent Johnson, 2 youngsters, are going to be guys to watch out for that have great offensive upside, and they're going to be full-time Blue Jackets this year. Igor Shinnikov as well has had a great preseason so far. He'll help offensively. But the defense is the question to Merzlikins. Is he number 1 goalie material? We don't know yet. Haven't seen enough. So I think you'll see Columbus in a lot of higher scoring games this year. What do you think here, Alex, for Columbus?
Yeah, overs for sure. I like overs. Like I said, I could over their opening night against Carolina, over 6. I like them over 79.5 points for the season point total. They got to 81 last year. 81 points gets you nowhere. That I think that's an awfully low total. I think they could be a little bit better than what they were last year, maybe by just a few games, but that's enough to get me into that 80-point threshold that I need. So I definitely roll with that. Like I said, the offense looks much better. The defense is going to be a bit spotty at times, and even the goaltending too, because Korpisalo and Merzlikins, if those 2 guys can't stay fully healthy, they don't really have much behind them. Tarasov had an awful postseason so far. The couple of games that I watched with him, he let in some really soft goals, so he needs some more work in Cleveland. But this is definitely a team I think they're going to be fun to watch. A lot of goals, for and against, but the wins are going to, come in waves, and they won't be able to do much to move up and get a playoff spot out of the Metro. But they'll definitely be a team worth betting on as far as over the total first period and full game.
I would agree with that. Dallas Stars next up here. Dallas, of course, snuck into the playoffs last year, barely. And I really think they only got into the playoffs because Vegas absolutely spit the bit down the stretch. They couldn't have played any worse than they did, the Vegas Golden Knights down the stretch. When I look at it this year with this Dallas team, they're going to go like, as always, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. They've got to be showing up every night for this team. And there are nights where they dominate. There are nights I can't find them with a telescope on the ice. That's the way you get. That's what you get with Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin half the time. Jason Robertson getting the deal done finally with him, so he should be available to them to start the regular season is huge. Robertson was just such an incredible, he was the guy that carried them offensively times down the stretch last year. 41 goals, 38 assists, 79 points. Reunite him with Rupe Hintz and Joe Pavelski could be your top line. I love the addition of Mason Marchment, his best season as an NHL player last year. That will help Dallas offensively a bit. There is some questions about depth scoring a little bit. We'll see if Jacob Peterson, Wyatt Johnston step up. Can Gurionov, have a solid year for them up front as well. The blue line is going to miss Klingberg because he played so many minutes, all situations, so impactful. You're going to need more out of Heiskanen, more minutes out of Lindell. God forbid, more minutes out of Ryan Suter. I don't know if at this stage of his career, that's a good thing for Dallas. But keep an eye on Nils Lundqvist. This is a guy that wanted out of the Rangers because a lot of defensemen had passed him in the depth chart, and he didn't want to be sitting and not playing. So Rangers acquiesced to his request, and they ended up trading him to Dallas. And he's played good in the preseason. So Nils Lundqvist is going to get the ice time with Dallas. Can he make the most of it? And they do have a great goaltender that I think came into his own last year, Jake Ottinger. The only reason they were sniffing around a massive upset against Calgary first round is Jake Ottinger's play. So Ottinger's going to have to be big for them because he's probably going to have to steal some games. I'm not a biggest fan of Peter DeBoer, as you know, so I'm not crazy about the hire. I'm more negative on Dallas, and I do have a small play on the under point total for them. What do you think for Dallas?
Not so fast, my friend. I actually kind of like Dallas to get right back into the playoffs picture here. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the Central is pretty bad, and when you look, you look at the bottom. Obviously, we talked about Chicago and Arizona. Talk about Winnipeg a little bit later. I think they're taking a step down. Nashville, they got in the playoffs, but they looked awful once they did. Dallas was the team that, like I said, it was mostly riding on Jake Ottinger, who I think, you talk about dark horses for the Vezina. He's a guy I would give a fair look at possibly to be in that final 3 range. Somebody I might actually throw some money on. But this is a Dallas team that they just find ways to win. And once again, I think Pete DeBoer is a good fit for Dallas because they've been so slow and defensive and methodical for a while, and they'll still keep that defensive responsibility. But we'll also see them try to increase and ramp up things offensively. And it's a lot of make or break spots for some of these offensive guys, the Tyler Sagans of the world that, we've seen just, not really just always live up to his potential and be consistent. Joe Pavelski, a guy who's been a great scorer his whole career, but now in the twilight of that, can he, produce, one more big year for them? Those are the question marks that remain to be seen. But I think their defense is going to be strong and reliable enough to get them where they need to be in the postseason. Do they do much once they get there? I doubt it. But I think they are a playoff team, so I would look for them to fall third in the Central. And didn't take a shot at their point total over, but it's definitely going to be probably 100 points to get there. So it's something I would maybe lean toward.
All right, Detroit Red Wings. Boy, what an off season! This is an off season. I thought Steve Yzerman did one hell of a job. He really did, and I love the head coaching hire too. Derek Lalonde, who is a guy that's got that winning pedigree. Everywhere he's been, he's had good teams. Go back to when he coached in college, USHL, ECHL. John Cooper's assistant, John Cooper disciple for the last 4 seasons in Tampa Bay before getting this job. He's just coming from winning team after winning team, winning season after winning season. That is going to rub off on this Detroit team, especially when, everybody was starting to get a little fed up with Jeff Blashill and the way things were going with him the last few years. It's a great hire. And then on the ice, what he did to improve the roster. You bring in David Perron. He's going to help offensively, 5-on-5, strengthen the power play. Good two-way player as well. Don't sleep on that. Andrew Kopp, one of my favorites the last year or two with Winnipeg and the Rangers split time last year. Great in the playoffs. Two-way center, offensively good, extremely good defensively, can play in all situations. Is battling a little injury here in training camp, but it's not something that's going to be significant time that he's going to miss. Dominic Kubalik from Chicago, who if he gets back to that 30-goal season he had in his first year with Chicago, and even if he doesn't, and he gives you at least 20 goals, that's still going to help offensively for Detroit. Philip Zadina, hopefully he can progress offensively. You've got Raymond, the first-round pick who had a solid year last year, is only going to get better. Larkin, Bertuzzi, Jacob Vrana, they're going to be able to score, this Detroit team, and I think improved defensively they are. And this is where I separate Detroit, Alex, from Ottawa and Buffalo, those two other teams in the Atlantic that could be better. I think Detroit's got a little bit more of a blue line that can defend at a little bit higher level with Sherratt, bringing him in, a veteran defenseman who's good in his own end. Same with Oli Mata to help out with Ronick and Mo Sider, who's going to be the next Nick Lidstrom, maybe, of this Detroit Red Wings blue line. You've got, some shutdown stay-at-home defensemen like Robert Haig when he gets back from injury. You upgraded in goal, and you've got a very good tandem now, Ville Husso and Nedeljkovic. Nedeljkovic maybe suffered a bit last year going from Carolina blue line to Detroit's blue line. He didn't play as well. I worry maybe a little bit Husso, it could be the same thing. You go from St. Louis's great blue line to a little bit weaker blue line with Detroit. But I still think it's a good tandem, and I think it's definitely better than some of the goaltending you see with Buffalo and Ottawa right now, especially with Talbot. We'll get to that. Talbot injured right now for Ottawa. So I like Detroit. High on them, over the point total. Took a shot with them to make the playoffs at a plus price, and I'll be looking at spots to back the Red Wings. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. This is definitely a bet-on team, and you mentioned the goaltending. Like I said earlier with Gibson and Anaheim, I think with Nedeljkovic in Detroit, he's definitely going to have a bit of a bounce-back year because he doesn't have to be the number one guy. This is definitely going to be a 1A, 1B tandem for sure because, like I said, Husso, as great as he was, can he duplicate that? I'm not quite sure. So I think this is definitely a good tandem and a tandem you can rely on to trade off and stay stable. So I think Nedeljkovic is definitely a guy I would look to have a good bounce back year because he was awful last year. I think he got pulled 9 times. That's the most of any goaltender in the league last year. And he was leading that category early in the season. I think he got 5 pulls before the All-Star break. So we'll definitely see a better effort out of him and this offense. And like you mentioned with Lalonde as a coach, maybe we start to see the beginning of that new tree coming from Cooper, like I said, that winning pedigree. If he can do something here with the Wings, and I think there'll be a team that will fight for a wild card spot. And like I said, we'll talk about Ottawa in a little bit, but if Ottawa can't get things together as far as the net, Detroit has the better goaltending, and they can maybe eke out a spot and get ahead of Ottawa. They could be a wild card team potentially, but there's definitely going to be some bet on spots with the Red Wings this year.
Yeah, definitely. And one of my favorite over point totals, to be honest, in the Eastern Conference, that is the Detroit Red Wings right here for sure. Edmonton, for me at least, Edmonton Oilers. When you look at this team, I'm not going to go into too much depth because really it's a lot of the same pieces from last year up front for sure. You got done what you needed to do. You brought back Evander Kane. We didn't think so that might happen, but it did. And he's back. McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Yamamoto, a very good top six when fully healthy. I think Ryan McLeod stepped up, got better down the stretch last year. Can they get something out of Jesse Puljujärvi, who's been disappointing? If so, man, you've got now 9 forwards deep that can put a puck in the net for you and chip in offensively. I'll give that blue line credit, Alex. I didn't think much of them going into the playoffs, and they all played better than I thought collectively. Darnell Nurse, Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak, Evan Bouchard, Tyson Barrie, they all played pretty solid, better than I had reason to expect in the playoffs last year. And the goaltending duo has to be better than Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. Just by default, it has to be improved. And look, Jack Campbell hasn't even won a playoff series yet, but we've seen enough out of Jack Campbell 2 years where he's played way above average goaltending for much of the time. And he's going to be an improvement in between the pipes for the Oilers. And now you're going to integrate Stuart Skinner long term as your backup goalie to him. So it's a better tandem in net. I like Edmonton Cup futures, Western Conference futures. Think about how last year they had a much weaker goaltending duo. They struggled early in the year, and yet still got all the way to the West Final against Colorado. And a full year with Jay Woodcroft behind the bench. Look at what he did. Look at the structure. Look at the kind of defensive aptitude this team finally showed a little bit of once Jay Woodcroft took over. What the hell was Tippett doing? That was supposed to be his calling card, defensive hockey. And yet they really didn't start playing better defensively until Jay Woodcroft took over. Now you got a full season of this guy who looks like one of the sharper, great young minds in the game right now, younger minds at least in terms of a head coach. Yeah, Edmonton definitely. And they got a lot of the key pieces back, better goaltending, lots to like here in oil country, in my opinion.
Well, and here's the biggest thing, too. We always talk about which team made the biggest splash and biggest signing. And, of course, we kind of all landed on Johnny Gaudreau going to Columbus. But what was the biggest addition by subtraction this year in the National Hockey League? It's got to be that Mike Smith's not going to be in net for the Edmonton Oilers, without question, because now you don't have to worry about his inconsistency. You've got a what could be a solid tandem.
You don't want to worry about goals going in from center ice. Oh my God.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so you got a tandem, Jack Campbell, who I think obviously any goaltender in the world is going to get the raw end of the deal in Toronto if you're not winning. I'm saying you could bring back Jacques Plante from the dead, and they would boo him if he can't get you saves and find a way to get out of the first round. So I think Campbell's a good goalie. I don't know if he's a top 10 goalie, but he's going to definitely be a huge upgrade in Edmonton for what we saw from Smith and company. Stuart Skinner's slowly getting better. He's a number 2 guy at best, but Campbell, I think he can handle the shoulder the load, and as high pressure as it will be to play in Edmonton, obviously the Oilers, they're right there with Toronto as far as fans of, the demand to win right now, but there's still less pressure, I think, on him in Edmonton than it is Toronto. Just a little bit. It's still going to be pressure, but it's enough where he can relax. And I think being in the Western Conference as well, he's just going to play better and get into a better rhythm. Remember, he started in the Western Conference those years he had with LA, so he'll be facing some familiar foes in that division. So Edmonton's the team I like. I'm high on them. They're going to make the playoffs. Can they make it all the way back to the West Final? That wouldn't shock me one bit. I don't see them getting to the Cup or winning the Cup. But they're definitely they're just kind of the same old. Like you said, there's not much really that changed other than the fact that, like I said, Mike Smith, after failing that physical, more than likely is going to be done. I'm guessing his career is pretty much over. So, we'll just see the Oilers, a little bit more sound defensively, which could make them a dangerous team.
And Evan Bouchard's just the breakout from him in the playoffs. That's now suddenly someone that could be a bona fide top 2 or 3 defenseman if he progresses the way he did in the playoffs. I loved Evan Bouchard's game at playoff time for the Oilers, and that was a big reason why that blue line outperformed my expectations at playoff time. Florida Panthers kind of has that feel, Alex, nowhere to go but down. You won the President's Trophy. I mean, you dominated the league last year. You've got some changes here. Look, Andrew Brunette, tough spot, right? Taking over for Coach Q, who had to fall on his sword because of his involvement with the whole Blackhawks scandal years ago. Yeah. And takes over in a tough spot, and he did a great job. Unfortunately, the guy got punished for early playoff exit in the second round and a power play that was so great in the regular season that did nothing in the playoffs. He got punished for it, and they made the coaching change to Paul Maurice. Here's the thing, and I said it in the free agency show. Florida has played a transition game, a rush chance game, a speed, north-south game. Paul Maurice coaches a cycle game, a forecheck game, work the puck in the offensive zone. It doesn't mesh with the style Florida's played the last few years. How is that going to fit? The good news is you brought in Matthew Tkachuk, who does play that forecheck, that cycle game style. Get in and hit someone and take the puck, and that's how he generates a lot of his offense. It's a good fit with Tkachuk being there, but overall, the system with this overall group, how is it going to mesh with Florida? I also think they're not as deep offensively. With Huberdeau gone, obviously, with Mason Marchment, who was such a big part of their offense last year, gone. You're going to need more from Verhaeghe, Barkov. Kachuk's going to have to deliver the offense he did last year in Calgary. Bennett, Reinhart are going to have strong years. But third and fourth line, there's some concern about consistency, what you're going to get from, Lusterinen, what you're going to get down in the lineup from Florida offensively. And then on the blue line, I've got questions there too, Alex, because Weegar was so good on this team, and he was great with Ekblad. And when Weegar was injured, Ekblad's play struggled. And you're going to elevate Gustav Forsling to the top pair. Is that guy ready to be a top pair defenseman? I don't know. I don't think he is. He'll give me a chance to prove me wrong. But right now, I got to say no. He's not ready to be a number one pair defenseman here with Ekblad, but he's going to get the shot. And then you got Gudas, who's slow of foot, Lucas Carlson, who's good but still young, Mark Stahl now, maybe best days behind him, and Brandon Montour. I mean, I think the blue line's a little bit weaker. And Bobrovsky, goalie Bob, looks terrible in preseason. There was one game he gave up 5 goals, and a lot of them are the soft Dairy Queen variety. And now they just signed Spencer Knight long-term. It could be when, not if, Spencer Knight becomes the number one goalie for this team at some point this year, especially because he played his best hockey down the stretch last year after some struggles early in the season. So I don't know. I think Florida's obviously still, they're not going to fall off to where they're not a playoff team, but they may not win the division, and you're not going to get a bargain to back them because of what they did last year. I'm going to be interested in looking for spots to bet against this team, especially early. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I agree. You'll be able to bet against them, and I also like unders with this team because of the fact that they're not going to play that up and down style. They're going to cycle the puck more, be a bit more physical and aggressive. It won't be as clean of a game, and I think we're going to see some value where the books aren't going to catch that right away. So we might get those 6.5s and 7s with Florida early, and we'll be able to hammer those unders. So that's the two things I'm looking at from a betting perspective. Overall, I think they still have enough to stay afloat. As tough as we talked about with the Atlantic and teams that are coming up, like the Ottawas and Detroits of the world, I think they still have enough, especially because we're going to see the decline of Boston. We'll talk about Tampa Bay in a little bit, and Toronto, of course. They're always in that mix. But Florida, I think the goaltending is really going to keep them afloat. Like you said, Bobrovsky looked bad now, and maybe this is the time where we see that change of the guard. Spencer Knight is the future, and maybe the future is now for Florida. He can start, and you have Bobrovsky as a quite expensive backup. You don't want to back up taking up $10 million worth of cap space. But if he can even play half as good as he did last year as a number 2 this year, I mean, that's Florida team. Obviously, we saw them as good as they were in the regular season. They should be good enough to definitely get back in the playoffs. Just don't know if we're going to see them make a run toward the cup this year. I think they're going to probably falter like they did. And thanks, I have to pat myself on the back one last time for making the call that Florida would end up getting swept out by Tampa Bay in that second round. And I appreciate those guys going to a strip club after losing in Game 3 and then completely no-showing getting Game 4. So I appreciate that. That was a very nice win in the playoffs, cashing that prop. But Florida, I think they'll get it together in the regular season and kind of fizzle out in the playoffs once again this year.
Yeah, and again, I wish Paul all the success in the world. He's one of my favorite coaches, one of the real good guys in the league, and great press conferences. He's one of those guys that will give you everything and then some in terms of information and detail and what he's thinking, what's on his mind regarding his hockey team. But it's going to be an adjustment, I think, for Paul this season at the beginning, transitioning this Florida team. All right, LA Kings here. Florida's still going to be good, but like I said, could be some early bumps in the road. LA Kings, team that just ahead of schedule, kind of, when you look at the year they had last year. I didn't expect them to necessarily be a playoff team, but there's a team with a lot of young prospects in the pipeline on the rise, and it was a good job by the Kings to make the playoffs last year. I think they're a playoff team this year. How much better they're going to be is a question, because everybody around them in that gauntlet of a Pacific Division is going to be good and in a lot of cases better. But Adrian Kempe, what a year for him last year, 35 goals for the Kings. Kopitar showing you he can still play at a high level, 67 points for him, and he's 35 now, no decline in his game. They get Kevin Fiala from Minnesota, very streaky scorer, but does help offensively. Arvidsson, of course, back again. Trevor Moore, what a great breakout year it was for him the last year. Philip Deneau found his offense again last year, and we know he's one of the better defensive centers in the NHL, but he got his offensive game back a little bit. Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Arthur Kaliev, keep your eye on him. He really got going in the second half last year. Quentin Byfield's just scratching the surface. I think he'll be a lot better this year for the Kings as well. And I like the blue line. Doughty's healthy to begin the year after not being healthy down the stretch last year. Mikey Anderson played well. Sean Walker healthy again. Matt Waugh, Alex Edler, the veteran, and Sean Dursey, outstanding last year at times for the LA Kings on that blue line. Little day-to-day injury right now, but they say he should be back sooner rather than later. The young 23-year-old Sean Dursey. Quick and Peterson had pretty solid years in net. I think it's going to be kind of like last year. I don't know if they'll make incremental improvement because everybody else around them is so good, but LA is definitely good enough to be a playoff team again. That's how I see it with the Kings. And if anything, maybe they'll play some more overs this year because the offense is better. And can we rely on Quick to be Quick had a turn back the clock year last year? It was one of his better years in a long time. Can we count on that again, though, from a guy that is the age and the wear and tear that he's had? And if he does struggle, can Peterson pick up the slack? I do think we'll see a few more overs and a few more 4-3 games instead of the typical 2-1, 3-2 King games this year. What do you think, Alex?
I absolutely agree with that. I love this team as an over team this year. Like I said, Quick, as great as he was last year, can he duplicate that at 37? A guy who's, like I said, a lot of minutes played, a lot of groin issues he's had as well. But at the same time, I think Cal Peterson is at that point now. He can kind of step up and take the reins where, it wasn't necessarily that he played bad and became the number two. It was that Jonathan Quick played so well late, he earned the number one spot. So I think we're going to see what they were trying to do at the beginning of last year. Groom Peterson to be the true number one. Let Quick kind of, wind out his career as the backup and still give you some solid starts throughout the year. But I think their offense has definitely improved, and I think they're going to be as good, if not just a little bit better than they were last year. So I like them as a playoff team, but I definitely think we'll get some value. Just like we just said about Florida with, those totals, the books may not catch up with them, and they might set those a little too high. I think they might set those Kings numbers a little too low, might get some 6s and 5.5 so we can capitalize on and go over.
All right. And now the only part of the season preview show that matters to one of our longest tenured viewers and listeners, Terry Edelman, here on the Ice Guys show. The Minnesota Wild, we have arrived at them. Minnesota, of course, last year, they've become a little bit of a playoff team, like not Toronto level, but, the disappointing early exits. It's getting to that point with Minnesota. I thought last year was a year that Minnesota was going to go on a deep run, and sure enough, they're getting bounced by St. Louis last year in that first round. This year, Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson Ek was pretty solid offensively for them last year. They're going to expect a lot, and they're going to need a lot from Matt Boldy. See if he can deliver that. Tyson Jost, hopefully a full season now with Minnesota after they got him from Colorado. He'll fit in a little better. Marco Rossi, high expectations for him. And he get the offense chip in consistently for this offense. The defensive core, Brodin, Dumba, Middleton, and Spurgeon. I like that. That's a good top four when they're fully healthy. We'll see if Kalen Addison, who they've got a ton of high expectations for him moving forward, will he be able to pick up the slack, be ready for regular daily NHL duty, game by game? Goligoski, Andre Schuster, John Merrill, for some depth in case there's injuries. And then you've got Marc-Andre Fleury in net, who, look, was kind of up and down, right, for him with Minnesota last year. And he's not getting any younger. So what are we going to see from Fleury for a full season? And they got to try to pace it with him. You're going to have to see a lot of Philip Gustafsson. And I'm sure Dean Evison has committed to that they got to play Gustafsson a certain number of games and keep Fleury, energized and fresh as possible down the stretch. But, I think Minnesota certainly going to be a playoff team. I think for me, it's going to be close between them and St. Louis. When you look at the Central Division here, second and third spots, they'll be battling for it in that division probably. It's a coin flip who you like better. Minnesota will be a playoff team, but again, they've got some playoff demons that they're starting to become prevalent, and they're going to have to answer them.
Yeah, I agree, and I think they do answer those questions and more. This is a team I like to possibly win the Central, depending on how healthy can they stay and how healthy can Colorado stay. I think they're going to be neck and neck. We already talked about Colorado kind of starting out slow. Can the Wild start off hot and kind of have that same run they did the first half of last year. That'll be the key, whether they can win this division or just simply be a playoff team. But moving forward, the biggest question, of course, will be in goal. Like I said, Marc-Andre Fleury, he stayed relatively healthy his whole career. He's also stayed relatively consistent his whole career. So can he do both of those things? And if not, can Philip Gustafson, who's still awfully young at 21, going to be 22 this year, can he step up and give you 25 solid games? That's the thing I worry about. I like the move of getting rid of Talbot. And, of course, now we see what, Talbot being hurt now. Fleury is the guy to rely on. But, could you have gotten a better backup? You don't want to start the clock on Jesper Wallstedt just yet. He needs one more good year in Iowa before he's ready to take over this team. And that's kind of what the plan seems to be. When you look at Fleury's 2-year deal, you think Fleury is the starter this year. Then Fleury becomes the backup next year or the 1B option to get Wallstedt groomed and ready for the future. So, that's the only question mark I have. But other than that, offensively and defensively, I think they're still pretty sound. Fiala is going to be a bit of a loss, but he played his way out of that town because of the fact that you look at how he just stayed in the penalty box basically the entire time for the playoffs. And like I said, his scoring consistency was streaky at best. So I think they'll be able to move on. I think there's definitely a lot of young talent that's ready to bloom and blossom. Marco Rossi. And some other guys down there in Iowa that, if they're given a chance, could step up and shine. And, you talked about Rocket Richard, props. You want to take probably not the longest of shots, but definitely somebody I would definitely look at being in the top 3 of that range. Definitely Kirill Kaprizov. He stays healthy. This is a guy, he could also possibly be a dark horse for the Art Ross. It's a guy who had a 100-point season. If he can duplicate that success and maybe even chip in a little more, we could see him do some big things. And this Wild team, they look good enough to me to where if they can stay healthy and I think they can finally overcome some of those demons in the playoffs, they could make it to the Western Conference Final or even win the West. So I would take a bit of a long shot bet with the Wild to win the West and get to the Stanley Cup Final.
All right, liking the Wild here as a futures choice for Western Conference and the Stanley Cup. I don't think we feel that way about the Montreal Canadiens in the East, our next team here. Look, Montreal, though, I will say this. I think it is a variance team coming into this season. They could be just as bad as they were last year. However, they could be significantly improved as well. I think it could go either way because you have to also factor in there was improvement with this team when Marty St. Louis took over. The Ducharme part of the season last year for Montreal compared to the St. Louis part of the season, there's no comparison. They did play with more structure. They did look better overall. But at the same time, you look at the roster this year and you look at the top 6, Caulfield, Suzuki's kind of battling injury already in training camp. Hoffman, Drouin, who's a wild card. We don't know what we're going to get from him. Monahan, I have no confidence in him until I see something between injuries and just not showing up half the time. Josh Anderson. Then you've got a big drop-off. Dvorak, Dadonov are capable, but Gallagher. But, you've got some issues there up front in terms of what you're going to get consistently from them. Is Slafkovsky even going to start the season with the team? I don't think he will, if to be quite honest. He hasn't stuck out in preseason enough, in my opinion, to the point where you're comfortable putting Uri Slafkovsky in there, I think, to begin the regular season for the Canadiens. The defense is terrible, in my opinion. I mean, I love the addition of Mike Matheson, and thank goodness they have him. And they sent Petrie the other way, which is not a huge loss because he struggled with Montreal last year. And I think Matheson is better than Petrie. But after that, you got David Savard, who didn't play well last year, Jordan Harris, Justin Barron, Madison Bowie, Chris Weidman. I mean, these are guys that are going to be asked to play, 3 to 6 defensemen for guys that are barely, 5, 6 defensemen. That's trouble. And Joel Edmondson on IR doesn't help to begin the year. I like Jake Allen, but Jake Allen now is a number 1 goalie with a shaky blue line in front of him. And the same goes for Montembeault, who hasn't been consistent. So that's going to be my concern for Montreal. That blue line is definitely a weak point for this hockey team. And I'm more anti-Montreal than pro-Montreal, but I do leave the door open because this team's just overall performance as a group was better with St. Louis. And they'll need that and then some to make any kind of inroads this year in his first full season behind the bench.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a hard team to read and bet on this year. I think they're going to be streaky enough to where you got to try to catch the wave at the right time to jump on or off of them, or for a look to fade them. They said they could be awful. They could be one of the worst 4 or 5 teams in the league, or they could be one of those teams that are just kind of pesky and hangs around a little bit and then fades out a little bit later in the year. So it's a really tough read. I would definitely look at overs with the goalie situation. Jake Allen, they're keeping him around long term. Obviously, Carey Price's career is essentially over. He doesn't have much backing him up. So whenever he's out, look to fade the Canadiens, maybe look to take some overs with those backups that he has. This is one of the weaker goalie, not just duo, but trios in the league, as far as I'm concerned.
There are going to be some nights when they surprise as underdogs, and they're going to end up surprising some teams. And there will be some spots to take them. But again, I am worried about the blue line. And again, you've got an Allen Montembeault combination, and I don't know if either one's ready for a number one goalie type of workload or quality in terms of performance as a number one. Nashville Predators. Look, Nashville made the playoffs last year, just got in, and then they got ambushed by Colorado. It didn't help that UC Saros was unavailable. They had Big Siv Dave and Connor Ingram. That's like throwing them to the wolves, against a team like Colorado last year. But, UC Saros is healthy now. The only major change up front was bringing in Nino Niederreiter from Carolina. You've got Johansson, Granlund, Duchesne, Forsberg, Trennan, Sissons, Tanner Jeannot, Eli Tolvanen. Very much the same players. By the way, if you didn't get a chance to check it out on YouTube. It's been on social media. Cody Glass finding out he's going to make the team in the meeting room there with GM David Poyle and head coach John Hines. It was great. I mean, just raw emotion that, hey, I'm going to be making the team, and he's relieved and excited and emotional. It was great. It's a great scene. So you should see that if you haven't seen it yet. It was pretty cool. Roman Josi, unbelievable season, the best season of his, and he's had a great career. And yet last year, he put his best season on the board. It was an incredible season. Carrier, McDonough, a nice addition from Tampa Bay, gives them that winning residue, if you will, that winning experience of winning a Stanley Cup. Ekholm, Fabro, Borowiecki, and Lozon. So the defense isn't bad. Saros is a good goalie when he's healthy. They're going to be life and death to make the playoffs. That's exactly where I see Nashville. Could make it. I think it's going to be close. It's going to be tight, but they are in the weaker of the two divisions in the Western Conference, the Central. So that should give them an opportunity to make it. But again, with Nashville, last year they outperformed a little bit. I'm going to have to see it this year from them. I'm kind of neutral on them, but just by default, I'm not a big John Hines guy. So that's why I kind of lean toward them maybe not being nearly as good this year as last year. But it's just a lukewarm opinion at that for me when it comes to Nashville. What do you think here, Alex?
No, I like this team to miss the playoffs for sure. This is definitely – and it's not going to be that they're just going to be awful. They're going to play okay, but I think, for one, the Central's only sending 3 teams, and I think that's Colorado, Minnesota, and Dallas. So it kind of gives you an idea of what I think about the rest. But they're going to be one of those teams that we'll see a little bit better play in goal because they got rid of Riddick. They did get Kevin Lankinen, who was, played great in Chicago despite having an absolutely horrible blue line in front of him. He's going to have much better defenders in front of him. And I think he might actually be one of those backups that you can bet on from time to time. I think we'll see him play a little bit more like he did his rookie season, especially with some help in front. And Saros won't have to play so many minutes. But you don't want him to get waterlogged the same way that they did to Pekka Rinne throughout his career. You're going to want Saros to stay a little bit fresher longer. And I think Lankinen might be a better answer to that than what they had last season. But as far as their offense goes, it's just really, really streaky. Of course, as a team, you always want to look to back at home and sometimes fade on the road. So that's the thing. If they start to wear and lose some of that home luster, then this is a team that could be in trouble. I think they see themselves on the outside looking in, not because they have such a terrible year, but I just think there's way too much in the Pacific going on, and I think there's better teams in the Central that they just kind of get left on the outside at its very end.
Yeah, and by the way, they are a no at a plus 145 or so to miss the playoffs, the Nashville Predators. So you get a decent price with that if you are so inclined. And I lean to the under point total as well with the Predators. Didn't bet it, but lean that way. New Jersey Devils next up here. Man, I'm telling you what, the New Jersey Devils last year had only 63 points, and yet I'm seeing their season point total this year for the Devils up to as high as 91.5. Like I'm actually shocked by this, that there's this kind of improvement. And look, I came into this year thinking New Jersey was going to be a little bit better, but we're talking about a Devils team that, again, last year, 63 points. Their point total right now is 91.5. We think they're going to be 29 points better this year. I think they're improved, and I think offensively they look really good. Heishier, Bratt, Mercer, Hughes. They bring in Andre Palat from Tampa Bay, guy that's won multiple Stanley Cups. That helps. Thomas Tatar had a better year last year. They've got Boquist. They've got Fabian Zetterlund. They bring in Eric Howley, Igor Sharangovich. What if Miles Wood gets back to full health and has a year that we think he's a good player? I do, but he was marred by injuries last year. That's a very good forward group. But how are they going to keep the puck out of the net? It's the same concern we have with New Jersey year in and year out. Dougie Hamilton can be problematic in his own end, although he's good offensively, certainly. Jonas Siegenthaler, same thing. Ryan Graves, more of an offensive-minded, rush the puck, smaller stature, sometimes has trouble with getting people to clear the front of the net. That's an issue at times for him. Damon Severson, Brendan Smith, John Marino. I like a couple of those depth defensemen, but overall, this team's going to have to show they can keep the puck out of the net. And look, Washington didn't keep Vitek Vanacek. Do we know if he's going to have a bounce back year in New Jersey? And Mackenzie Blackwood, good one game, bad the next, and injured the next game after that. That's basically what you get from Mackenzie Blackwood. Good one game, bad the next, and then he's injured the third game. That's been Mackenzie Blackwood's career. So you're projecting a 29-point improvement, and I think they're better than 63 points from last year. But that much improvement, they're going to be able to score goals left and right. I think they're a great over team with their game totals this year. But that defense and that goaltending has me a hard time thinking that they're 29 points better than they were last year, Alex. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I was stunned by that too. And it's funny because, the goaltending, I think, will be better for both guys. These are, the two other goalies I had circled and that mentioned about, the rough years they had. Look at Mackenzie Blackwood. He, chose not to get vaccinated, so they had to get another goalie in for that. They used 5 different goalies last year with the Devils. It was mostly because of his, not being able to go to Canada or his injuries. So if he can stay healthy, I think he'll have more of a regular rotation. I think he'll get back to playing better, than he has the last couple of years. And same thing with Vitek Vanacek. He doesn't have to really worry about necessarily being in a 1A, 1B spot. He has the open lane to be the starter here. So if he can take that and run with it, then we'll see where that goes. But this is a lot of inconsistency and a lot of question marks. Like I said, to expect a point increase of 29.5, I would look to play this under. It didn't make my card. It was really close to being a half unit play, but I definitely think they have another year where we see them kind of miss out on the playoffs. But they'll definitely be a good over team throughout the year, and they might be one of those sneaky teams late in the season once they're out of the playoff race that you might be able to get some good dog prices. And they can find a way to beat a team that's maybe not as interested as playing them in late February or March.
All right, New York Islanders, very bad offseason in my opinion. And look, I'm a big fan of the career that Lou Lamoriello's had as a GM, but this was not his finest work here in the offseason. I mean, firing Barry Trotz was surprising, to say the least. I couldn't believe it when it happened. They swung and missed on Johnny Gaudreau. They swung and missed on Nazem Kadri. Apparently, the Islanders were in on both of those prized free agents. They didn't get either one. They haven't necessarily improved this offense. They did sign Barzal long-term this week. But boy, I mean, Beauvillier, we know he's capable, but he's not consistent. Nelson, Lee, Parisi's best days behind him. Palmieri kind of took a step back last year. Where's your third and fourth line offense going to be? Josh Bailey's production. Everybody had their production essentially decline, last year for the most part on this Islanders team. And then, of course, you're going to need Oliver Wahlstrom, who I think is one of their younger forwards that could step up, give them some of that offensive punch they need. But he's a little bit injured to start here in training camp. That's not good for the Islanders. So that's a concern. The defense last year, it's worth talking about them. We thought for years under Barry Trotz, what a great Islander blue line. But whenever you took Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech off that blue line, and suddenly they were nowhere close to as good. And we saw that on full display last year. So it's vital that they stay healthy. They've got Romanov. They get him from Montreal. He'll at least give them a little bit of a physical presence. And I do like Noah Dobson. He is the one guy that on that blue line, I'd have him on my team. He keeps getting better. Noah Dobson, great year last year. Probably can build on that. He's only 22. I like the goalies. I don't love them, but they're good enough. They're serviceable enough in Sorokin and Varlamov. But to me, I don't know, with everybody in this division looking like they got a little more offense in them. I know to some extent, a lot of the Islanders' issues last year were injuries, a COVID outbreak during the season, midway through. starting the year on the road for a month plus while they waited for the new arena to get built. All of that were things for the Islanders that really derailed their season, and they won't have those this year. But at the same time, I wonder if this roster is good enough to make that incremental improvement. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the perfect point. They had a lot of things going against them last year that, if they didn't have to start 15 straight games on the road, they'd probably make the playoffs. And this is a team, keep in mind, too, before missing last year, we saw them play a lot of hockey, back-to-back, deep conference finals runs, grueling overtime games. And this is pretty much the same core. I mean, they hardly changed anything from those last couple of years, like you said, but we haven't seen the production increase. We've just seen them just kind of stay steady. They are mid at best. This is the epitome of mid-range, this Islanders team, and every level. Even the goaltending, like I said, Sorokin, he has some bright moments. Varlamov, he has some bright moments. And, then they kind of fade out and they swap out for each other. But there's just nothing that says they're going to get over the hump against any of these other teams in the East, in the Metro. So I would look for them to go under as well. And this would be a team that, like I said, we'll be able to bet some overs with. Maybe not so much relying on their offense. We never do. It's, whether the defense and the goaltending can hold up.
It's definitely a wait and see when it comes to the Islanders for me. And until proven otherwise, I'm more anti-Islanders right now than pro-Islanders. New York Rangers, Alex, we talk about this team so much. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I already took them this year, Eastern Conference and Stanley Cup futures. I think they're going to be right there at the end. The addition, believe it or not, of Vincent Trocheck's excellent because he fills the void left by a Kopp going to Detroit. Perfect fit to get in that number 2 center spot. You've got obviously still Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin. Alexei Lafreniere looks good in training camp, and so does Kaapo Kakko. Look out. Kaapo Kakko's lighting it up, and look at last night, the night he had for the Rangers. If they get him playing up to that first-round talent potential, it's going to make the Rangers even more scary. Philip Hedl, a playoff breakout for him last year, a full season. Look out for him as well. I love them up front, Barclay Goodrow. Vitaly Kravtsov, watch out for him. He played in Russia last year. He's had some pro experience already. I think he'll be fit into the NHL, and it won't be a learning curve as much for him. The defense, Adam Fox, Ryan Lindgren, Keandre Miller, Braden Schneider, Jacob Trouba, now the captain. Great blue line. You do get concerned depth-wise if they suffer injuries, but that starting 6th on the blue line is good for them. And, of course, an elite goalie in Shesterkin. Love the coach, Gerard Gallant. Wins everywhere he goes. So, yeah, we're high on the Rangers. Playoffs, yes. You're not going to lay the price. It's a big price, but they'll be obviously a playoff team. I think they can win the division. I think they will. I've got them to win the division, win the East, win the Cup, and over their point total. I was surprised it was as low as 99.5. What do you think, Alec?
Yeah, this is definitely a Rangers team I'm high on as well. I said neck and neck with the division, so I didn't take that price. I think they're gonna be right there with Carolina. Would love to see these two teams play again in a playoff series. I think that would be a lot of fun as well, if possible. But I think the Rangers have what it takes. The biggest thing, of course, is going to be Shesterkin staying healthy. He's got an illness. He's day-to-day right now. We saw Jarl Halak give us some soft goals last night against the Bruins, and that was an exhibition where the Bruins were playing a lot of their top guys. And we've already talked about how they're going to struggle. You're not going to see the Bruins score 5-6 goals every night this year. They did it last night against Halak, and he looked pretty soft. So the drop-off there from 1 to 2 is actually a little bit wider, despite getting rid of Georgiev, who had been, a bit kind of mid-range here and there in his couple of years behind Shesterkin. So Igor is definitely the guy that's going to have to carry them away, and he's going to have to be a true number 1 and shoulder the heavy load of games, regular season, and, of course, playoffs. But I think they have enough on offense, and I think that they can, stick around and finagle things long enough. And you mentioned the kid from Russia, Kravtsov. If he can kind of, emerge in the same way that Artemi Panarin did that first year with the Hawks, we've seen this from these guys from Russia where, they've had the experience in the KHL. They come in and have these big, first years. Kirill Kaprizov is another guy. Dominic Kublik's another guy. Yep. So if he can be in that same vein where he can produce some offense, and then you stick around long enough, you're in the race. Obviously, they're definitely going to be in the playoff hunt. Come trade deadline time, if they can find a way to add a Patrick Kane to this lineup, they are definitely a bright favorite to get there to win a Stanley Cup. So this is definitely a Ranger team I'm high on. They're going to be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, we liked them last year, and they obviously were way ahead of schedule with their progress as a team. And obviously, we're very high on them again this year to be right there. Ottawa Senators. I like this team to be better. I caution you, though. We do have some concerns and some red flags to begin the year. Cam Talbot's injured. That's something you worry about. And I like Anton Forsberg, but I like him in small doses. I don't know if I like him playing every other night and being my number one guy until Talbot gets back. And this blue line, the jury is out. I like Shabbat, but Zub, Hamonic, who just can't stay on the ice. Sanderson's very young. Brandstrom hasn't progressed as much as we thought. And Nick Holden, Zaitsev. That's what you're looking at as your blue line for Ottawa. That's not a great blue line. That's not a great, we can keep the puck out of our net blue line right there for the most part. But up front, I mean, this team is just spectacular on paper. I mean, you can't ask for much more. Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, Alex DeBrincat, Timmy Stutzla, Claude Giroux, of course, signing close to home in the offseason. Shane Pinto, who is a great talent, is going to be on your third line start the year. And I love Tyler Mott, bringing him in. Great two-way forward. Great little under-the-radar signing by Pierre Dorion. Outstanding up front, the Ottawa Senators. But there are still some blue line concerns. And without Talbot, you're going to have to go with Anton Forsberg and Magnus Hellberg to begin the year here for the Senators. So just like we talked about with Buffalo, Columbus, teams like that, some overs. Bet some overs with Ottawa. They're going to score a lot of goals. They're going to give up a lot of goals, especially early in the season without Cam Talbot. I do think once they get the defense solidified and Talbot back, they're really going to take off. And I still think they could push for the playoffs. Still like their over point total, but more than anything, I like over their game total. And I want to mention the Jack Adams Award, Coach of the Year award props you can bet. Look at maybe DJ Smith as a long shot. Look at for Ottawa. Look at Derek Lalonde, like I mentioned for Detroit. Look at some of these long shots, because when you're betting that prop, you want to bet some of these teams that have this massive improvement. Not so much the best team and the best coach, but the coach that's going to be improving his team the most from last year to this year. Lalonde's on that short list for me. DJ Smith's on that short list for me. And that's what I'm looking at when it comes to the Jack Adams Award Coach of the Year award props that you can bet and really get some good prices with some of those coaches. Alex, what do you think here for Ottawa?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because DJ Smith, I've actually found that between 14-1 and 18-1, that's something I'm actually going to end up adding to my personal card for sure for Jack Adams. I think this is an Ottawa team that's going to do very well. Of course, like I said, the big blow is losing Cam Talbot. And I said that in my write-up. This was the first point total I bet at 86.5 points. I bet them also to make the playoffs at plus 210 early in the summer. I think that's come down now. I think it's plus 175, plus 180. But I like this Ottawa team. The top six is absolutely tremendous. Alex DeBrincat going into this offense. Claude Giroux coming back home, wrapping up the end of his career to add with these young guys. They have a great mix of veteran and young talent. The blue line's a bit shaky. Like he said, there's definitely going to be a team to bet overs with. But if they can find a way, even, all right, let's say Talbot comes back, but he's not solid. Can they find a way to make a deal and get a big-time goalie in here? Can they, they're going to be a bit up against it with the cap, but if they can find a way, maybe we talked about Bobrovsky struggling. If Bobrovsky doesn't necessarily just fall off the face of the earth, but he doesn't, keep his number one job. Can Ottawa swing a trade late in the year to make a push to get Bobrovsky to push them into the playoffs? I think that, they have that kind of wiggle room for certain things. So I think they're a team that they'll do well enough to put themselves in a position to maybe even get better and stronger going into the postseason run by trade deadline time. So I think they're worth a shot still betting over the total. Playoff prop, if you can find it, like I said, anywhere higher than plus 180 at this point, I still would look to take a shot with that too. But obviously you want this team to have Cam Talbot or some more sturdiness in goalie, because Forsberg and Hellberg will not be the answer all season long.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be the key. How long are they without Cam Talbot, and when will he be back? But they're going to be able to score goals, make no mistake about it. Philadelphia Flyers, I don't know what they're going to be able to do, but nevertheless, 61 points for them last year. And you look at this year with their point total, and look, I still had to bet Philadelphia under their point total, but 73.5 is where they were slotted. I just don't see how this team is going to be 13 points better or 11 points better than they were last year. 13 points better. They were 61. Their point total is 73.5. 13 points better. This group, not a chance, in my opinion. So I still like them under 73.5 points. Look, here's the issue. up front, where's the goals going to come from? We've talked about all these teams that are going to be able to score. I don't know about this Philly team, Alex. You look at JVR. Is he still a number one line type of player at this stage? Konechny comes and goes offensively. They might start the year with Morgan Frost, believe it or not, who's not proved a thing yet at the NHL level as their number one center because Sean Couturier is going to miss time at the beginning of the season, which is the worst thing that you could ask for. He's one of their best players all around. And to be without him to start the year, you look at the third and the fourth line, Wade Allison, Noah Cates, Patrick Brown, Farabee. I like Owen Tippett. I do like his game, but that's a thin forward group. One first line through fourth line on paper. The blue line looks like it's got its share of issues. Ivan Provorov has to bounce back after a down year last year. If he doesn't, wow, this blue line could be really poor. Because D'Angelo, I don't know if D'Angelo's personality with Tort's personality, how's that going to go over in Philadelphia? What if Torts gets on him for lack of defensive awareness, which sometimes he has, D'Angelo? You think D'Angelo's going to take to that with his kind of problem child personality types? Now, he was better behaved in Carolina, but you go from a great Carolina team, Brindamore, to this team and a team that's probably not going to have a great year. You could see him getting cantankerous, D'Angelo, and vice versa with Torts. Sanheim on the blue line's okay, not great. Ristolainen's been a bust. What a terrible contract that was for Chuck Fletcher. That guy spends more time during games in the penalty box than he does on the ice. It's just not been good. Kevin Connaughton, we talked about, well, here he is. He might actually be starting the team on the blue line this year. Kevin Connaughton, journeyman defenseman, has been with 8 teams the last 4 years. Justin Braun, Nick Seeler, just depth defenseman, and poor Ryan Ellis. His career might be over. Just terrible news, and it's absolutely a shame. He was a really great player for years, especially in Nashville, and to think he may not play again, what a shame that is if that's the case. Carter Hart in net, but again, he might have a weak blue line behind him. They really like Samuel Urson, who's played well in training camp for the Flyers, but he's a project in terms of their goaltending down the road. I like them under their point total. And even more than that, I'm taking it a step further. I could have gotten earlier in the summer, plus 1,500, 15-1, Philadelphia worst regular season record in the NHL. It's been bet down to 11-1 in a lot of spots. I still like it at that price. I think there's a very real potential for the Philadelphia Flyers to be the worst team in the NHL this season. And at 11-1 odds, I like that price for them to be the basement dwellers in the NHL. What do you think of Philly, Alex?
Yeah, I think they'll be the worst in the East. I mean, they got a lot to compete with in that West with Chicago and Arizona, how bad they're going to be. But they're definitely going to be a rough team. And if you had told me, at the end of last season that this team's going to get rid of Mike Yeo as a coach and Martin Jones as the goalie, I would automatically say, well, they're getting a lot better. But then they didn't add anything else. They went and got John Tortorella, like you talked about, his personality can, rub it off one way or the other with some guys. You get Tony DeAngelo, another, character that maybe, could disrupt things in the locker room. And you don't have much offense. We still don't know, the question of is Carter Hart going to be an elite goalie yet? And he's often injured. In fact, he's banged up right now. Felix Sandstrom is the third string goalie. He's banged up right now. So it's Troy Grosnick, and pretty much you don't know who else could be the backup for opening night if Hart isn't ready. So there's a lot of question marks and issues, and I don't see anything really truly positive sticking out right now for the Flyers. I think they got to really go into a kind of a deep rebuild, which how many times over the last 2 decades have we said the Flyers need to rebuild? It's getting old and stale, and I'm sure the fans aren't happy about it one bit. This is going to be a rough year for the Orange and Black.
Yeah, it's going to be tough times for sure. And look, the hesitation, I guess you could say, is that usually when John Tortorella takes over a team, there's an initial improvement right away, and he gets the team better. I just don't know if he's got the roster or the horses. If you don't have the horses in the stable, I don't care what your track record is immediate improvement as a head coach with your new team. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the horses to run with, you're not going to have an improvement, and I don't think you will with Philadelphia. He had better rosters in Columbus, better rosters in New York, when he took over those teams. Doesn't have that here. In Philadelphia, not even close. All right, Pittsburgh Penguins next up here. Pittsburgh's one of those teams, again, it could be a lot of – if this team – let's say the ceiling. Let's take the ceiling perspective. They reach their ceiling. They stay healthy. We get lots of games out of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, a lot of the older players. This could still very well be a playoff team, and hell, if they get in the playoffs, could make some noise. It could happen. but I think that's asking a lot with this group. When have we, even Crosby's been bitten by the injuries the last couple of years, and Malkin, we forget him playing 82 games. I'd be shocked totally if he plays 82. You could say the same thing about Letang this year. Thank goodness for Jake Gensel. Jake Gensel might be a dark horse too for that lead goal scorer, because I think he could have a tear. He showed he could score without Crosby last year for much of the season. So Jake Gensel's, Ricard Raquel played pretty well after they got him from Anaheim. You've got Rust, you've got Zucker, of course. Hopefully Jeff Carter doesn't take too much of a step back. He is getting older. You need Kasperi Kapanen to wake up, because this guy should be more of an impact offensively than he's been, and he's going to have to be this year for this Pittsburgh Penguins team, in my opinion. The blue line, like I said, I don't love the losing Matheson and you replace him with Petrie. I think that's a downgrade. Pedersen, Ty Smith, they hope he can a change of scenery helps him. I do like them getting Jan Ruda from Tampa. That guy's a heart and soul player, shot block, limping off the ice in the playoffs last year, and he comes back the next shift. Those are guys you win with. I like that addition. Dumoulin's still a good defenseman when he's on the ice. Tristan Jarry for the Penguins in net, a pretty solid year overall last year. He had his bumps in the road, but capable goalie. This is a hard team for me to handicap, because I think their ceiling is playoffs and maybe even win around, but their floor is, it could completely fall off the rails. And if Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and multiple of those three miss time, playoffs are going to be a hard time. They'll be Jim Morris, Mike Sullivan will be Jim Morris Sr. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs if he's got all these guys hurt again this year. So I think it go in a bunch of different ways with Pittsburgh. No preseason futures for me with the Pittsburgh Penguins, on or against. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I'm tired of trying to predict the Penguins' eventual demise, and they proved me wrong. However, with this year, I think the injuries that could really kind of hold them back and cripple them would be Gensel, Rust, and Jarry, because you have to rely on, at this point, a Penguin season where you're going to miss Evgeny Malkin, you're going to miss Chris Letang, and you're going to miss Sidney Crosby. It's happened every year for the last several years. And Letang's deal, re-signing for as long as he did, is arguably the most mind-boggling contract in sports right now. I don't even remotely understand. Does anyone think he's going to play into his 40s? With the fact that he's only played 45 to 55 games a year in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't understand it.
And you don't think he's going to have more tax on the body and more injuries in the next 6 years with a track record of it?
You literally have to move this guy up to be a fourth line or third line forward to keep him healthy enough to try to play into his 40s, in my opinion. Yeah. I just don't see it. And this is a Penguins team, like I said, they don't have the depth that they had 10 years ago. We're seeing those depth players that we rely on to say, oh, Pittsburgh's going to be good, because even if they do miss Crosby or Malkin, then here comes, Rust out of nowhere. Here comes Gensel. Here comes all these. Well, now these guys are here. They're the key guys. There's no one behind them anymore in Wilkes-Barre and Scranton. So this is a Penguins team. If the injury bug nips them pretty hard, they could be in some serious trouble and miss the playoffs. If they stay healthy, I think they still float around and possibly be a wild card team. But, don't let someone get hot in the Atlantic Division. Or Detroit or Ottawa could come sneak up right behind them and keep Pittsburgh out of that wild card race, even if they have a decent season.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of question marks there. Like I say, a wide range of possibilities, but I'm pessimistic personally. Same with this team. I'm very pessimistic about the San Jose Sharks. And the reason for that is, look, San Jose, we know on paper, there's no team worse in the Pacific Division at the very least than San Jose. I mean, you look at who are they going to get offense from outside of Meyer and Hurdle and Couture? LeBanc can sometimes chip in, but Luke Cunnin is going to be asked to play a top-line role. I don't know if that's a good fit. You got Gregor, Bonino, Nieto, Gadjevich, Lorentz, and Evgeny Svechnikov rounding out a forward group that, look, offense is going to be hard to come by outside of, a couple of players, 3 or 4 in the top 6, and that's about it. The defense, Carlson, Vlasic is definitely saw a little bit of a drop in his defensive, and he's been a great defensive-minded defenseman for years, but even he dropped off a little bit last year. Matt Benning, Radim Simek, Megna, I mean, these are just depth defensemen. And then you've got 3 guys as your goaltenders, and none of them are number 1 caliber right now, in my opinion. James Reimer, Capo Kakinen, and our old friend Farmer in the Dell found a landing spot once again. Aaron Dell with the San Jose Sharks. I mean, the problem for San Jose is not only are they the worst team on paper roster-wise in this division, but it's because everybody else is either as good or better this year in that division. Edmonton, Calgary, LA, Vancouver, will get to them. Anaheim, I think, is going to be a lot better. We talked about them. Where does that leave San Jose? Seattle's going to be better. Where does that leave San Jose? Unfortunately, last place in the division, in my opinion. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to be at the bottom. Like I said, they don't have much to write home about offensively or defensively. And then you look at the goaltending. I think Kaapo Kähkönen, I think he still has a high ceiling. I'm not writing him off just yet. I think he'll be the guy who eventually emerges with this team as their number one goalie. James Reimer comes back to San Jose. His best days are past him. Of course, Aaron Dell, he comes back to San Jose. And, whether he's a Shark or a Barracuda in the AHL, follow me at AX Smith Sports on Twitter. We'll be sounding the old garbage can in the siren whenever he's in net. We're looking for those overs with old Mr. Dell. So the Sharks, they're gonna struggle. Like I said, there's teams in the Pacific that are way better. Even the Anaheims and Vancouvers, they'll be able to battle with them. Hell, even Seattle. We'll talk about them in just a moment with their defense. I think they might be get around to something. So San Jose, definitely last place team in the Pacific.
Yeah, I agree with that. Last place team in the Pacific for sure. Tough season on tap for and tough. David Quinn as well, taking over as the new head coach in San Jose. Tough sledding for him in his second tour of duty now as head coach in the NHL. Was with the Rangers, of course, years ago. Seattle Kraken. Look, Seattle played like an expansion team last year, even though Vegas did not. They did. They will be better. How much better is the question, but I really think there's potential up front because you're going to have Matty Beniers, you're going to have Shane Wright, you're going to have Yanni Gord, you're going to have a potentially strong, and again, success with a team, a lot of it times starts with strength and depth down the middle at the center ice position. You might have that with Seattle. You bring in some offense with Andre Burakovsky from Colorado, Oliver Bjorkstrand from Columbus, a team that struggled to score goals a lot last year. That is going to help. This Seattle Kraken team. Let me see where Seattle was in scoring. Yeah, fourth worst, 2.6 goals per game. I think offensively they'll be a little bit better this year, the Seattle Kraken. The blue line, when they started to suffer injuries, you saw the problems with that. When they're fully healthy, it's not bad. It's not as good as obviously a lot of the other teams in their own division, but Dunn, Oleksiak, Adam Larson, Justin Schultz, that's not bad for a top four when they're healthy. But if you suffer injuries, you do get a little bit concerned. I think he could only be better than he was last year. Philip Grubauer in net for Seattle. Obviously, going from Colorado to Seattle and his first year with the Kraken last year, he struggled mightily. But I think he'll be a little bit better. They're not going to be ready for the playoffs yet, Seattle, but they will be, I think, an improved hockey team. There's going to be some good spots to back them. I think a little over team as well this year, more often. It's kind of like LA. I do think the offense with Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky is a little bit better. But defensively, they could still give up some goals. So you might see some overs, a few bit more with the Seattle Kraken. And a thing to get excited about, one of the best TV broadcast booths going in the NHL this season. I mean, John Forsland and Eddie O is as good as it gets.
Oh,
those two people are phenomenal at their jobs. John's an incredible play-by-play guy. Hey, what do you say? That's hockey, baby. We all know those great slogans of his. They're off and running. And then Eddie O's probably the best analyst in NHL hockey and has been for years. So that booth is outstanding, and they'll be a joy to listen to and watch this season. How about on the ice, Alex, with Seattle?
Yeah, it's funny. 30 years ago, the big movie was Sleepless in Seattle. Of course, Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. But I think this year it's going to be Sleepy in Seattle. I like this team to play some unders. I think they're built for what they were trying to do last year. Everybody looked at the expansion draft and said, well, this team doesn't really look like they're going to build to score. They're going to try and play defense and slow things down. And that's what they've done so far in the preseason. They've had, 3 or 4 shutout games. I think most of the games they've had held opponents to 2 goals or fewer, 3 goals or fewer. This is definitely a team, I think, that's built to play low and slow hockey, which is great for them being on the West Coast. We got to stay up late anyway. So help us kind of tune in a little bit at night watching this team play a little bit more sound defensively. I think the offensive chances will come. They are better built in the top 6 department, but I think their goal will be to kind of shut teams down. They can't compete with the firepower of Edmonton, Calgary's, Minnesota's, and Colorado's of the world. They're going to have to beat you up and play low and slow hockey to win games. So I think we're going to see that, and I think they will be improved a little bit more as a result of that.
I agree with that for sure in terms of they'll be better. I just think that they're going to have a little more offensive potency. But again, it could be canceled out, this over theory of mine, if Grubauer really has a good year and a bounce back year, because we think there's a better goalie in him than he showed last year. He may not be as good as he was in Colorado, but isn't as bad, I don't think, as he was last year in Seattle. So we'll see what comes of that, an improvement in between the pipes for him. All right, St. Louis Blues. St. Louis, to me, you look at this group, mostly, Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, Vladimir Tarasenko, Brandon Saad, Ryan O'Reilly, Jordan Kyrou, Braden Shea. I mean, they've got a really good forward group. And kind of like last year, we saw a changing of the guard, Alex, with the Blues. They went from a defensive-minded, lower-scoring team. They had to score goals, and they got into a few more higher-scoring games last year. Will it be the same this year is going to end up being the question mark for the Blues coming into the year, because I think they'll be able to score goals. You look at the blue line, Scott Perunovich, very unfortunate, out for most of the year now, suffered an injury in training camp, and he was expected to take on a bigger role with this blue line. So it's going to be a lot now on the shoulders of Krug, Falk, Leddy, Parayko, Bortuzzo. You know what the common thread, though, Alex, with all those guys is they're not getting younger. They're all in their 30s now. Mm-hmm. So how good's the blue line going to be? That's a question. Binnington got his game back down the stretch last year, regular season playoffs. He was very good. He was excellent against Colorado before he got hurt in that series. That was a good sign for St. Louis. DraftKings has them 40-1 to win the Stanley Cup. I think that's they shouldn't be that high. St. Louis isn't going to fall off that much. I had to take a little swipe at that 40-1. There's some books that have them 22-1 to win the Stanley Cup. That's more in line with probably where they should be. 40-1 just seemed a little bit, there's a little too much value with that. The Blues are going to have the offense coming into this year. So it's an interesting team. I think they're a playoff team once again this year, the St. Louis Blues, especially when, we'll have to see what comes of Minnesota, some of the other teams in that Central Division, Dallas, Nashville. Because of question marks with them, I certainly still think St. Louis is a playoff team. Look, do I think they're winning the Cup? No. But at 40-1, I just felt at that price I had to put a little something on it. What do you think here for St. Louis?
I think you might have actually been able to get even more value with that a little bit later on, because I don't see this team as a playoff team at all, to be honest. I think this team's going to really kind of fall off a little bit. And like you said, they're getting older. I think the books have kind of, maybe looked a little bit too much of the fact that, Binnington, like I said, he did look great in the playoffs. He got his game back together when they needed to the most. But in saying that, this guy's been wholly inconsistent the last two seasons, and I don't think he's going to just start off hot again like he did at the end of that series before he got hurt. Then to back him up is Thomas Greiss, a guy who I think is pretty much done at this point. He's certainly a career backup moving ahead for the rest of his career. You can't rely on him to give you 20, 25 starts. So are you now going to rely on Binnington to give you 55, 60 starts after we saw Ville Husso basically be the reason why his team even made the postseason last year? I see a big drop-off for St. Louis. They won't be one of the worst teams in Central, obviously, but I think they definitely easily miss the playoffs. And if they try to start getting in the firefights with some of these higher-powered offenses in the Western Conference, they're going to pay for it dearly, because they cannot keep up with the pace of Colorado, Edmonton, Calgary, even Minnesota. I think this year, I think those teams have improved more, with St. Louis, I think, has gotten a few steps slower and older.
All right, and this is another one where St. Louis, there's going to be wide-ranging opinions. See, I don't think they're ready to fall off that much, but there's also a case that can be made they could, especially if Binnington doesn't bring that playoff performance from last year with him in the regular season. Tampa Bay Lightning. Look, Tampa Bay is not going to miss the playoffs. They're certainly still going to be a playoff team, but I think this is a pace-yourself regular season. 3 straight years to the Stanley Cup final. They do have to replace Andre Palat, who is outstanding for them in the playoffs. You still have Stamkos, Kucherov, Braden Point, but all of a sudden now you're going to be integrating Nemesnikov in the top 6. Alex Killorn's offensive game kind of declined. They didn't get what they thought they would from Hagel consistently offensively. There's some more question marks about the offense a little bit for Tampa. Now, they did bring back Paul especially, which was big. Still have Perry. And Ross Colton, who had a nice season last year for Tampa. They'll be able to chip in offensively, but it's going to be way more by committee this year, the Lightning. On the blue line, Victor Hedman, Sergachev, Eric Chernak. But, you lose Jan Ruda, you lose Ryan McDonough, 2 very good defensive-minded pieces of these playoff runs the last couple of years. You're going to need to see more from Cal Foote. Can he handle the increased workload in minutes? Ian Cole brought in as a veteran. And Philippe Myers, who's going to be asked to do more as well for this team. So the blue line maybe not quite as balanced or depth-laden as they were last year. You still have obviously one of the best goalies going, Andrei Vasilevsky, goes without saying, but I'm picking my spots to fade Tampa Bay this year, especially early on. Obviously, they're not going to fall off to the point where they're not going to be the playoff team. They will be. I don't even think they care about winning the division. I don't think they care in the least about winning the Atlantic Division. Just like last year, it's just let's get through the regular season. Let's just get as many wins as we need to get in the playoffs, and then we'll flip the switch. And that's what we saw from Tampa. They flipped the switch at playoff time and still got to the Stanley Cup final. That's their MO. That's their mantra. So as a regular season bet-on team, not for me, and especially at the prices you're going to be asked to command to back the Lightning. What do you think, Alex?
I know that's the plan, and I think that plan will slightly backfire to the point where they will make the playoffs, but I don't think they run out of steam once they get into the playoffs this year. Like I said, as much as I backed them the last 2-3 years, I'll probably be looking to fade them in that first round, whoever they play. I just think they've built up so much over the last 3 seasons, 4, 5 seasons, really. You can even go all the way back at this point with some of these guys back to that 2015 Cup run they had and lost there. It's a lot of pressure-filled hockey, a lot of injuries these guys have overcome throughout the years as well. I could just see things just kind of starting off slow, and they end up getting some momentum. And I think, they will be able to pace themselves enough in that second half to get through and make the playoffs. But once they get there, I think it kind of falls apart. So no future looks for them. Pick your spots. Like I said, I'll be fading them more, especially because the books are definitely going to still over adjust and still make them as $1.70, $1.80 favorites, where they probably should only be in a pick 'em range. So we'll definitely get some value going against Tampa Bay throughout the year.
Yeah, and Nick Paul, for as good as he was last year, and I'm glad they re-signed him. It's smart, I think, by Julian Breezebois to bring him back. Keep in mind, a lot of his success was in the playoffs. Is he going to be able to bring that same kind of success, production, throughout an 82-game regular season? That will be something that will be worth watching as well. All right, we're down to our last 5 teams. What a show it's been getting through the entire NHL. All 32 teams here getting you ready for the season with opinions on each and every one. And here we go again. Toronto Maple Leafs, as we enter yet another season, wondering if they can win a playoff series. Hard to believe that we're here again with this team, but here we are. We know we don't have many things to worry about with their forward group. Matthews, Marner, Kerfoot, William Nylander, Michael Bunting. They're still going to be very good up front. Tavares is going to miss the first couple weeks of the season, but they'll get him back. Nick Robertson, the younger brother of Jason, of course, who plays with Dallas. He has been terrific in camp. I think he's going to make the Leaf team finally, playing up with that offensive potential that they thought he would have. Dennis Mulligan has really stepped up in preseason too and given them some offense. They have Zach Aston Reese, David Camp, Obey Kubel from the Stanley Cup champ Colorado Avalanche to give them some cup winning experience. They are very, very depth laden up front. The blue line, I think, is better. Morgan Riley with TJ Brody, Muzzin, if he stays healthy, Hall. I think the fact that they got Mark Giordano there for a full season is going to make them better, and wait till they get Liljegren back. I think the blue line's actually are they a great, top tier blue line? No, but they're still one of the better blue lines Toronto has had to begin a season in years. But it comes down to the Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov combination. This is a roll of the dice of the utmost. This is a roll of the dice to the tits by Kyle Dubas. No question about it. To go with these 2 goalies. Now, if you gave grades on their performance in training camp and preseason, you'd give them both A+, Murray and Samsonov. They've both looked great here in the month of September and early October. But we got to see it in the games that count. We've got to see it against the best, forwards and best rosters and lineups that the other teams put out there. And we got to see it in the playoffs. We got to see everything from Toronto in the playoffs. Now, the one thing I will say about Toronto, give them a little break. You can't compare the way they went out against Montreal to the way they went out against Tampa last year. Montreal was their tail between their legs. It was a disgrace. They coughed up a 3-1 series lead. The Game 7, they put up no fight. They were never in that game, and they lost to a Montreal team everybody thought they would beat easily. Last year against Tampa Bay, they gave it their all. They were right there, toe-to-toe with the Lightning. 7 games, they lose 2-1 at home, and it was that close. The margin was razor thin between the Lightning and the Leafs. But at the end of the day, it's another first-round exit, and they've got to show they can overcome that. So, yeah, hell no to me betting any futures with the Leafs until I see something in the first round. I didn't bet anything Toronto futures wise, point totals or anything in terms of cup or conference futures or division futures. Alex, what do you think of the Leafs?
I don't drop a lot of bombs too often, but I'm going to drop this one. I think this is the last year we see Austin Matthews in a Maple Leafs jersey.
Wow, not even right out the 2 years left.
Not
on
even
his
right
deal.
out the 2 years left. I think this season will be the one that drives him out of Toronto. He's going to say, "I want out. I want no part of this any longer." We're going to see them do the same thing we did the last several regular seasons. They have this great offense. They score a ton of goals. Their blue line is going to be shaky at times, and I think the goaltending is just as bad as it was the last few years. Matt Murray's not the answer. We saw him fall off of basically Mount Everest compared to where he was from Pittsburgh to Ottawa, and now bouncing back. Samsonov, I think, will be a little bit better. I think he ends up winning the number one spot in some point in time, but I don't think it's going to be enough. We see them just kind of get back into the playoffs as either the third team in the Atlantic or a wild card spot, and they get bounced out of the first round just like usual. And I think Austin Matthews gets sick and tired of it and says he wants to be done. So that's what I'm expecting from the Leafs this year. Same old, but it's going to be a big change at the end of the year.
There you go, and a big change. So Austin Matthews saying, "I'm done with this." So, do you think they make the playoffs, or is it just going to be playoffs?
They make the playoffs, but it's another first round exit. They lose 6 or 7 games.
Yeah. All right, Vancouver Canucks. See, Vancouver to me is in a just situationally they're in a good spot to begin the year because they've got Bruce Boudreau there for a full season, a full training camp. It's going to help this team. Don't love it that I see Ilya Mikheyev and Brock Besser injured in training camp, but Mikheyev could still play opening night. It's not serious with him. Besser will miss the first 3 weeks, but I love the group up front. Again, this is another one of those teams where, up front, I don't have issues with Vancouver. JT Miller re-signed, which was huge for them. You've got Niels Höglander ready to, I think, have a big season after showing signs last year. Connor Garland back. Elias Pettersson got his game back under Bruce Boudreau, started playing better. This Andrei Kuzmenko looks terrific. And you talked about those guys that were overseas and they're ready to play at the NHL level immediately. And here's Kuzmenko from the KHL, where he had 20 goals and 53 points for St. Petersburg last year. And he's looking ready for the NHL if training camp is any indication. So keep an eye on Andrei Kuzmenko. You want player props I'm going to be looking at for Vancouver games early in the year? Andrei Kuzmenko, folks. You don't have to wait till next Wednesday when they open the season to figure that one out. We'll be looking at Andrei Kuzmenko props. Podkolzin, Horvat, Mikheyev, a great addition from the Leafs. They still got Tanner Pearson as well. I mean, they're going to have some offense up front. The blue line is the big question mark. Tyler Myers, he's been around a long time now. Can he keep playing at a solid level? Poolman's got to be better than he was last year. Dermott, can he step up? Luke Shen is just, middling at this point of his career. Ekman Larson, kind of took a step back at times last year. Quinn Hughes improved his defensive game, but he's going to have to keep improving that. We know he's got the skating, the shot, the passing, the power play, the offensive abilities from the back end. Quinn Hughes keep working on that defensive game. And they do have a great goalie in Demko. When Thatcher Demko's healthy, absolutely a very good goalie. I like Vancouver. I'm still more bullish on them than not. Keep an eye on that blue line. It's going to have to hold up if the Canucks are going to really make big-time inroads this year. But I do think they can contend for the playoffs. I do like them over their point total, a full year of Bruce. And I don't mind Bruce Boudreau. Someone mentioned it in the chat, Alex, the Jack Adams Award prop, at a decent price. Bruce Boudreau never has issues in the regular season. Yeah. It's after that when his problems are. And the coach of the year is based on regular season performance. And so for that reason, and I think they will be better, I don't mind looking at a coach of the year, Jack Adams Award prop on Bruce Boudreau, who is 20-1 right now in and around that range. I don't mind that. There are other coaches I think have more value than Boudreau and as good or a better chance. Like I said, like a Smith or a Lalonde or someone like that, maybe even a McClellan for LA, maybe even a Woodcroft for Edmonton if they have a blistering season. But Bruce at 20-1, I don't mind it. Alex, what do you think of the Canucks?
Yeah, the only thing that would stop me from that is for him to win that. I would think it would take Vancouver they'd have to win the division, in my opinion. I think being a playoff team won't be enough. Like you said, especially with Woodcroft, if he can do big things in his first year, and I think they win that division. Actually, I think that will kind of keep him at bay from being in that spot. But I do understand the value and the price of that. Being worth a look. But this Vancouver team, I just feel like they might. be able to keep some of the energy they got from Boudreaux. Remember when Boudreaux came in, they were white hot, and that's when they were kind of riding things. But then they kind of faded in and settled down. They just weren't that good of a team. I think they're a better team overall, and they play a little bit better. But I just think, we might see a bit more streakiness. I think we'll see some of the streakiness we saw when Boudreaux was with Minnesota. You saw them go have one big run of 9-10 wins in a row. Then all of a sudden, next they're playing 10-10 the next 20, or 5-15 the next 20. So we're going to see a lot of peaks and valleys with Vancouver. I think that's what kind of keeps them in the mix for a wild card. But even if they were to go to the playoffs, they're not going to do much, because that's especially where Boudreaux tends to fall off is once it hits postseason time. So Vancouver will be an interesting team. I probably won't be betting on or against them too much, at least side-wise. In totals, might lean toward the under, like I said, with Demko playing well, but they do have some great offensive talent. Just hope that Pedersen can stay hot and not be as streaky as he's been in his career. He's a guy who I thought was going to be a superstar in this league by now, and he's been a bit of a disappointment.
All right, the very polarizing Vegas Golden Knights, and this is a team that I've heard so many differing thought processes and opinions on coming into this season. I think it comes down to what you think of Jack Eichel, because he's going to have to be a horse. He's going to have to be the superstar that we think he could be for Vegas to realize their full potential this year. And look, I think it was unreasonable, even though I didn't think he played great, to expect him to be great right away with Vegas, just coming to a new team. He had no training camp. He's coming off a serious neck surgery. All of that probably precluded him from playing well. But now you're going to see him for a full training camp, full season. The problem is, you had to get rid of Max Pacioretty and get nothing in return. Just terrible cap mismanagement by Kelly McCrimmon in the front office of the Golden Knights. Just absolutely terrible. And by the way, when you see in the trade, Max Pacioretty going to Carolina for future considerations, that means jack shit. That means nothing. They're not getting anything in return. So it's just unbelievable that happened. Phil Kessel is somehow maybe going to be on a top line. Maybe 10 years ago, that's a good thing. I don't know if it's a good thing in 2022. Phil Kessel may be on a top line with Eichel and Riley Smith. Marchessault, Carlson, and Stone have to be big-time offensive difference makers, and Stone's offense was not the same when he came back from his injury last year. Stevenson, Nicholas Waugh, Keegan Colasar, and then, where's your offense going to come from the bottom six? It's concerning a little bit. The blue line I still like when they're all healthy. That's still pretty good. It's definitely an above-average blue line when they're healthy with Pietrangelo, Theodore, Haig, McNabb, Martinez, Whitecloud, no question. Logan Thompson, how good is he? He better be good, because Robin Leonard's not coming back anytime soon. Aiden Hill's not looking good here in training camp. He's had some tough games. And Michael Hutchinson ain't it. So it's got to be Logan Thompson. And I think there's potential for him to be good. He had some glimpses last year for the Vegas Golden Knights, but is he ready to be that bona fide NHL #1 goalie? We won't know until we see some of it this year. So I like Cassidy. I think he's going to make them a better defensive team. Cassidy teams in Boston, Alex, Bruce Cassidy, consistently were one of the top defensive teams in the NHL. He will help Vegas at that end of the ice for sure. This could be an under team. I think offensively it could be pedestrian for them. And I think their defense is going to be better. And if Logan Thompson's even the least bit capable, could be seeing some more 2-1, 3-2 hockey in the futures for the Vegas Golden Knights this year in terms of game to game. So, but in terms of their point total, I lean under, but I respect Cassidy enough that I'm not going to bet it. I am pessimistic though, because I worry about their depth in offense. I worry about the goaltending a little bit with the group. And I worry about whether Eichel can be that superstar they need him to be. I mean, we need to see it. So what do you think, Alex? Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, I went under 97.5, and I took a shot at plus 250 with the no for the playoffs. The goaltending is just highly questionable. I do think Logan Thompson's the future. I've watched him play up close, and I've seen some of his tape. He looks good. I think he could be a future #1, but I think he's not ready just yet. I think he could have definitely benefited from having a full year of #2 behind Robin Leonard, but Leonard's out pretty much for the year. Bassois is out long term. Like I said, Aiden Hill and Michael Hutchinson, you aren't getting anywhere with those two guys in net. And like I said, we talked about how tough all these other teams are in the Pacific. I think Vegas finds themselves out of the playoffs. And I think we're going to see some really rough road ahead for Vegas, because look at this, 2 years in a row now. You traded Marc-Andre Fleury to Chicago for an ECHL player who didn't even go to your organization, and now the guy is out of hockey. And now you trade Max Pacioretty for future considerations, which could possibly be literally nothing, looking forward. just some depth player or some kind of a prospect or draft pick to get back. A lot of free agents, you're selling Las Vegas, of course, to try to get free agents in. But as far as organizationally, they haven't really made the best look around the league as far as how they're treating some of their star players. So, yeah, you can sell all the glitz and glamour of being Vegas all you want. But, hell, if you play with any of the other 31 teams, you're still going to get to go to Vegas at least once. So I don't know if they're going to have as easy of a time getting guys to play in Vegas moving forward the way that they've treated some of these stars. So I think we could see some rough times for Vegas, not just this year, but moving forward.
I think there's definitely truth to that, and that the luster of playing in Vegas now. Every road team's gone there now. Every regular season. So even that, wooing them to Las Vegas is going to be a little bit tougher moving forward. So yeah, I am more pessimistic than optimistic when it comes to Vegas.
Yeah, me too.
But the only reason I stayed off the under is because I think of Bruce that much, and he's a good coach, and maybe he can get the most out of them. But there's a lot of things that are going to have to go right.
If there was a prop for first GM fired, I would love to bet McCrimmon.
Yeah, he almost should be already fired.
Him or Fletcher would have to be the co-favorites. I would bet McCrimmon even over Fletcher. So.
Yeah, good candidates, both of them, no question. All right, Washington Capitals. Here's another pessimistic team for me. I did take them under their point total here. I see a team that every year seems to get just a little bit worse. And when you look at this Washington team, Alex Ovechkin and Kuznetsov and Backstrom, who just can't seem to stay on the ice. He's already starting the year on IR. So is Tom Wilson, TJ Oshie day-to-day already in training camp. The core's not getting any younger. I like that they brought in Connor Brown. I will say that. Connor Brown's just a terrific, hardworking, great two-way player, good offensive upside. I do like that addition. Dylan Strome as well, because he played well down the stretch in Chicago. But boy, I mean, the core of this team ain't getting any younger. So you're going to need Connor McMichael to take a step forward. Mantha's going to have to be even more impactful. That's what you're going to need here for Washington, especially with the potential that Hagelin, Backstrom, and Wilson, and maybe even Oshie may not be ready to start the year. The blue line to me is a little shaky. Fehervari is still developing, not a finished product. John Carlson, great offensively, at times defensively, not nearly. Nick Jensen, Eric Gustafson's a liability defensively at times. TVR, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, solid, but not spectacular. Dmitry Orlov's their best, I think, shutdown, stay-at-home type defenseman, and he's actually day-to-day right now with injury. And then you've got Darcy Kemper in net. Great regular season, little shakier in the playoffs, but you don't have Colorado's blue line. And I think part of Kemper being so great was didn't face as many shots because Colorado's got the puck on their stick all the time. Colorado was just a puck possession monster. Not going to be the case so much with Washington for Darcy Kemper. You're going to have to face more shots. The opposition's going to have more offensive zone time than teams that played Colorado did last year when Kemper was there. So will that negatively impact Kemper's play? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, more negative than positive for me entering the year on Washington. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I would say the same. It's unfortunate that teams have to send a division have to send three teams each to the playoffs, because the way this Metro shakes out, I really think there's only two teams worthy of going to the playoffs, and that's Carolina and New York. Washington will find a way to get there potentially, but it won't have to do anything special. It's going to kind of, one, get healthier than they are right now, which, I think the Wilson injury is going to hurt them more than Backstrom. Backstrom, for as good as he's been his career, he's a guy who has stayed, quite injured. So I don't think his drop-off is worth as much now as it used to be. The goaltending wise, you look at Darcy Kemper, like I said, solid regular season goalie, but he doesn't have exactly what to work in front of him like he did in Colorado. Charlie Lindgren, don't sleep on him just yet, because he's had a bit of a shaky career so far as a backup. But 5-0 last year in his NHL time, looked good in some of his AHL time too. I saw some of his stuff during the postseason. Wasn't too bad. Maybe he's kind of grown into his own at 28, and he could be a capable 1A, 1B option potentially. So that could keep them afloat a little bit. Of course, we know Ovechkin's a horse. He's going for his record, and he's going to carry the team on his back as long as he possibly can. And they've got some characters that can kind of keep things afloat for a while. I see them sneaking into the playoffs and then getting bounced out quickly. So, Washington will have a okay year, but certainly won't be anything monumental. The only thing will be, to watch for Ovechkin when he's going to keep scoring goals, and how long can he keep this streak. He certainly should get past Gordie Howe this year, and of course get closer and closer to Gretzky.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the Ovechkin watch is on. That will continue throughout the season as he tries to track down Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record. Capitals, like so many teams, especially in that Metro, they're going to be right on that, precipice of the playoffs, in or out. I mean, it's going to be close with them and a bunch of teams that are all interchangeable, in my opinion, in that Metro division. All right, we have reached our 32nd and final team of our season preview show, the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, Rick Bowness takes over as the head coach this year, and he didn't waste time trying to shake things up, taking the C away from Blake Wheeler. Wow, that's a way to try to shake things up here for the Winnipeg Jets, who obviously had a disappointing season a year ago, finishing with just 89 points outside of the playoffs. I've got more doubts than positives about Winnipeg. The one thing that Bonus will try to do, and it might help Winnipeg. Winnipeg struggled defensively, and Connor Hellebuck had one of his worst years. Bonus has become more of a defensive-minded coach. We saw it with Dallas. They really focused on that end of the ice, and he's going to try to make this team a better defensive team, and I think that's what they need. I think that what Winnipeg needs and what this head coach might be able to deliver them actually fits pretty well. But are they capable, even with a system that's going to dictate more defensive awareness, going to be able to improve? Because I look at the blue line, Alex, I like Morrissey and DeMello, but I don't know if they're a top NHL pairing on the blue line. And then after that, Logan Stanley didn't progress the way we thought. Neil Pionk, after a good year 2 years ago, not nearly as good last year. Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt, the two veterans, kind of disappointed, underwhelming with what we expected. They signed both of them in the offseason, and they didn't have the seasons we thought. Hellebuck's play declined. So that's the big question mark, defense and goaltending. And can Hellebuck bring it back and get his game back? He better, because Big Siv Dave, who's now the backup here, he ain't the answer. Up front, you're going to get, I think Kyle Connor's actually worth a flyer too for the Rocket. I mean, 12-1, he's going to be the guy that's going to have to absolutely go nuts offensively for this Jets team this year. And we know he's capable of it, Kyle Connor. I like Nikolai Ehlers quite a bit as well. Scheifele has more to give, in my opinion. Same with Pierre-Luc Dubois in terms of game-to-game consistency. Blake Wheeler has lost a lot of his offensive luster, if you will. Can he get some of that back this year? That's the question. And you need some of your younger forwards that are going to get opportunity to chip in as well. Dominic Toninato, Mason Appleton's back with the Jets. Cole Perfetti and Morgan Barron in particular, good young forwards. You need offensive impact from them, because I don't know if they've got that third, fourth line offensive punch, the Winnipeg Jets, like they've had in years past. So questions about this team. I think in theory, conceptually, a defensive-minded coach like Bowness with a team that's trying to improve defensively is a good fit. I just don't know if the defensive personnel is there for Bowness to realize that defensive improvement, because all those guys collectively have to be better. And it's basically you're running back with the same six on defense you had last year. So it's going to have to come from within, the improvement on defense. If it doesn't happen, they're going to miss the playoffs again. If it does happen, then maybe they've got a chance, but it's a big if. What do you think, Alex, for Winnipeg?
Yeah, I think they miss out on the playoffs here. I think we see pretty much a tear down overhaul. We're planning for that in due time with this Jets team. I think this, older pieces are going to start getting moved. Hellebuck, for as good as he is, he's one of the best goaltenders around, but he's logged a lot of minutes, and you just wonder, the wear and tear as it starts to build. Will he end up missing some time long term? If he does, the Jets are in trouble with David Riddick in that, and not much behind him as well. So there's a lot of open space here with the Jets, where I just don't think they're going to be able to keep around, even with how bad the Central looks to be this year. They're not good enough to get past the Colorado, a Dallas, a Minnesota. Even St. Louis, I think, is ahead of them, and even Nashville potentially could be ahead of these teams. The only teams worse would be the Hawks and then the Yotes. So this is a Winnipeg team I'm very low on. We'll look to fade them, especially if we start seeing stretches where Hellebuck gets 4, 5, 6 starts in a row. I'll be looking to kind of fade him on those fifth and sixth starts, and we might be able to get some good value. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at fading the Jets, not even totals wise, but just on the money line. I'll probably be betting against them more often than not.
All right, there we go. And that is your NHL season preview. In terms of looking at all 32 teams, I guarantee you we're the only show on YouTube that's doing this. Every team previewing them start to finish, alphabetical order for the season ahead. But it was great analysis, great insight, and we hope we gave you some ideas to look at for the upcoming season. And we are excited to be with you, of course, every day. That's right, every single day, 7 days a week, starting next Tuesday. We are very much looking forward to that. Every game on the board. It'll be Alex and I. We'll have Jimmy Murphy on with us once a week. We'll have tons of guests sprinkled on throughout the season as well. So looking forward to another season of the Ice Guys. But before we wrap up this show, I know some people have asked about it in the chat. We weren't going to leave before we talked a little NHL Global regular season opener tomorrow in Prague of the Czech Republic. San Jose Sharks, Nashville Predators. Nashville minus 185. Favorites here in this first of the back-to-back. They play again on Saturday. This is specifically the Friday game that we're talking about here. 5.5 the total in this one. We do have James Reimer confirmed as the goalie for San Jose in this game. You'd expect UC Saros to be the goalie for Nashville, but with it being a back-to-back, is there a chance they rest him the first game and only play him the second game? I don't think that's the case. In fact, I think there's a better chance that they play him both games. Because in the Czech Republic here, but I would expect it to be Saros for Nashville. Look, I think Nashville's better than San Jose. I'm not looking to bet San Jose. I'll tell you that right now. It's either fade San Jose or pass, but I'm not laying $1.85 in far away from home, miles away from home, over in Europe for an opener in a unique environment, overseas. I'm not laying that kind of price in the very first game of the season. I would try to get creative, Alex. That would be my best recommendation here. Like, I'm not going to bet much on this game. If anything, maybe I'd look at some props. Maybe I'd look at maybe a first period correct score prop. Nashville 1-0. I'm seeing that at plus 375. I think that's something you could sprinkle a couple bucks on. I could see that. I could see it being a tight, conservative opening period, but Nashville breaks through, finds a goal. And they shut out San Jose, who I don't think are going to be great offensively outside of Tomas Hertl and Timo Meier and Logan Couture. I think they're going to have trouble outside of that threesome to be able to score goals this year. So that's the one thing I've got my eye on. Maybe first period score 1-0 Nashville. You can get that at about plus 375. Alex, any betting thoughts here? San Jose, Nashville, and Prague.
My plan of attack was going to be to watch this game and look for some live opportunities and then go from there to look to what to bet on for Saturday. So I know I've heard a lot of people already say, fade whoever wins Friday for Saturday. I'm not necessarily just going straight to that theory, but I want to just kind of get some more intel and see where this is going. I usually don't bet these European Opens. I remember the Hawks did it years ago against the Flyers. I don't really touch these too many times when they go, even if it's in the middle of the season. But so, you want to kind of tread lightly. If anything, I probably will look to fade both of these teams, certainly maybe San Jose, when they come back to the States for their, domestic opener. So that's something that I'm kind of have more circled than anything else as far as these two teams being concerned.
Yeah, no question about that. Tread lightly with these two games. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing here. And then the Saturday game, I can't really say much because a lot of it is going to be, let's see what happens Friday, and we make our decisions to bet anything for the Saturday game between these two teams based on what happens on Friday. But if you want to get involved with Nashville in some form, maybe you look at a first period minus a half in the first period. I wouldn't talk you out of that. Maybe a puck line for greater value, but I could see Nashville winning by a goal exactly. So be careful with this. Like I say, minus a half first period might be your best look, but I like that 1-0 Nashville at plus 375 after the first period.
You know what? If I like anything, or Ian, if you like anything, we'll just put it on Patreon for the Saturday game. We'll just post it up on there.
Yeah, exactly. Because we won't be on the air after this show wraps up in a few minutes until Tuesday next week, when we will be with you for the North American opening night on Tuesday. And we are definitely looking forward to that. That'll be our first, everyday live show during the NHL season next Tuesday. We're looking forward to that. And it looks like we might have our old friend who will be with us a lot this year on the show, Vito. Rinus Vitalins will be joining us Tuesday, it looks like, for that show for the North American opening night. We'll talk, of course, Lightning Rangers and Golden Knights Kings. A nice doubleheader next Tuesday. Looking forward to that. And Vito will be with us for our Saturday and our Sunday shows once again this year, just like he was last year. So looking forward to that. We're going to have Jimmy on once a week. We've got several guests coming up toward the end of the month, the last couple weeks of October. So we're looking forward to it. The betcasts, by the way, our first betcast is going to be Tuesday, October 25th. All right, the last Tuesday of October. that will be our first live betcast of the season, and we'll do one per month on a Tuesday in October, November, December, and January. And Tuesday's the obvious day, Alex, because who the hell wants to do a betcast on Thursday when there's Thursday night football and there's other things going on? We want to stay away from football.
Yeah, exactly.
No doubt. We want nothing to do with competing with NFL football. So that's why we picked Tuesday night. It's the obvious night. Lots of hockey games always on Tuesday night. So great night to do the betcasts, and we're looking forward to that. Before we wrap up this massive, mega edition of the Ice Guys and our NHL season preview show, Alex, some final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm going to try my best to get all these timestamps for people so they can just kind of flip through the weekend and pick what teams they want to listen to hear us talk about, or you can watch the whole show either way. That all will be available. Like I said, definitely check out the patreon.com/ice guys. We're going to have way more content on there. I know a lot of people were kind of disappointed last year. Things kind of fell off, but we got all the charts back. Ian's got his own set of power rankings. I have mine with the goalie depth charts and home ice advantage. We'll have some write-ups and some other fun things in there as well. Check out the store, Ice Guys, at myspreadshop.com. We got a brand new T-shirt in there. We're going to have some more things we're going to be throwing in there in the mix. The same logo with hoodies and caps and all that. So check all that stuff out. I also want to say thanks again to National Hockey Now for being our new carriers, and we're looking forward to what's going to be another fun season of hockey.
Absolutely. Well, geez, forgot. We got to do this, of course, before we end it. We do this every year. Almost forgot. It's because we usually do 2 preview shows, not 1. So we usually save it till the second one. But because I'm gone all day tomorrow, we're just doing the 1 big preview show today. But we got to give you our Stanley Cup final and Stanley Cup champion predictions. I almost forgot. I've already made up my mind. Now, last year I got one right. I said Colorado, Carolina in the Stanley Cup final. Colorado obviously got there last year. So we got one of them in the Stanley Cup final. Let's see if we can get both of them in the Stanley Cup final. And I didn't have to think long and hard. I said, I like these teams. I'm making up my mind. I'm putting my foot down right now. This is going to be your Stanley Cup final this year. New York Rangers, Calgary Flames. Stanley Cup final for me. I was going back and forth with Edmonton. They were in the mix in the West. I could have gone with them. Carolina was in the mix in the East as well, a couple other teams. But I went with the New York Rangers versus the Calgary Flames. My Stanley Cup final prediction this year. And I'm going to go with the Calgary Flames, believe it or not, to end the drought for Canada, believe it or not, because I think they're so complete, both ends of the ice, forward, defense. Darryl Sutter has won a Stanley Cup. I think he's finally got the personnel he wants. It hurts because I thought for a minute I was going to go with the Rangers, but I'm going to go with Calgary over the Rangers in the Stanley Cup final with the Rangers Flames. Stanley Cup final. So that's my prediction there. Again, we got one of the teams that I predicted in the final last year, hopefully both this year. Alex, what do you think? Stanley Cup final and champion.
Well, it's funny because I also had one of those teams last year, right along with you in Colorado, and we've got a team in common this year. I like the New York Rangers out of the East. Like I said, it was between them or Carolina. I think they're going to be neck and neck all year long. I think we can see them play. If they meet in the playoffs, it'll be the exciting full 7 games. And I think the Rangers can come out of that. I think they can win the East. Out of the West, I like the Minnesota Wild. I think they'll be able to finally exercise the demons and make a run, and they can finally win the Western Conference, bring a Stanley Cup Finals game back to the state of Minnesota for the first time since 1991. But ultimately, it's probably going to end a lot like 91 as well. I like the New York Rangers to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup, bring it back to Madison Square Garden. I think the Rangers are going to have a ton of talent, especially if they can make the moves they're talking about. We've been hearing all the way back to the end of this last year, Patrick Kane could end up being in a Ranger uniform at some time. That happens during the deadline, and this team produces already without him. That addition, I think, will take them over the top, and they'll be able to win it. So I like the Rangers and the Wild to meet in the finals, and I like New York to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup at the end of the summer.
There you go. We both like the Rangers in the final. Alex has the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup, but doing so over the Minnesota Wild in the Stanley Cup final. And I don't even think our good friend Terry's here live in the chat to hear that. Maybe he is, but he's just not in the chat at the moment. Of all times for him not to be around. But nevertheless... Oh, well. Nevertheless, great stuff. Great show. Thanks to everyone. I mean, too many people to name. Jarek Rubel, I love seeing your name in the chat because we haven't seen you as much last year. I know you're busy. MDR24, Real Deal Prime. Melissa was around in the chat briefly. Of course, Let's Go Wild Picks, Terry Edelman, Brian Watson, everybody that I didn't name, David Shelton, Alan Trimble, Rocco Rogers, Dominic French, Olaf Fubb. who was on our betcasts down the stretch last year, Manny Davison, everybody that joined us, C. Bills, a diehard MMA podcast, a.k.a. Clint McLean. I mean, everybody, Barry Smith, Ben James, we appreciate all of you joining us here on this preview show, season preview edition of the Ice Guys, our first sojourn, maiden voyage, if you will, with our new partners here at National Hockey Now. Great stuff, as always. And that'll wrap it up. We will be back with you on Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, for our first everyday live show of the Ice Guys for the new season, and we'll preview the ESPN North American opening night doubleheader. Looking forward to it on Tuesday. For Alex B. Smith, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the two San Jose Nashville games over in Prague. Good luck, and we will talk to you again on Tuesday for another edition of the Ice Guys. And we get the season started Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's the Ice Guys presented by the National Hockey Now.